I didn't sell out, son. I bought in. Keep that in mind.
Welcome to episode 254 of the Independent Characters. This is Carl.
This is Josh.
Yeah, it is. And with us, we have two of our favorite people, honestly. We have Liz Apke. Welcome, Liz.
Hello. Thank you to having me on.
And we have Space Hulk Troy.
Hey, thanks for having me.
From the basement of death. And literally the guy, one of the team that runs the best event at Adepticon ever.
Maybe. I appreciate it. I do appreciate it. There's lots of good events. I appreciate that people enjoy ours. So
yeah, well, yours keep selling out super fast. Josh and I often talk about we shouldn't have talked about it because everybody signs up for it now.
Shot ourselves in the foot. We can't get in now.
Yeah. But anyway.
That's how I found out about it.
See? My own worst enemy. Okay, this episode is sponsored by Gozer Shark and Kyle Romberg from our patron. Thank you guys so much. And thank everybody who's participating in the Patreon. We very much appreciate it. It is super helpful. And it's kind of keeping us going right now. We just had a bunch of taxes and other stuff we had to pay as a result. I was talking to Josh about that earlier. And then we're also
appreciate the support and lots of content. Hopefully coming your way more regularly, more consistently.
Now we're also part of the Goonhammer Media Network, so check us out at goonhammer.com for more, media.goonhammer.com for more shows and information. So if you haven't listened before, we are doing an episode of what we call the Warrior Lodge, which is a moderated discussion around several topics that I'm going to bring up. And then we'll hear what Josh, who will probably agree with me on most of them, and then Liz and Troy think about each of these topics. But it's just topics and opinions I've drawn from both our community as well as the community at large. And sometimes they're relevant to the time. Sometimes they're timeless. So we'll get into that. But
all hot takes all day.
Before we get started there, let's leap into Elite Choice. And I will go first because this, and Liz, you've seen the show notes, but this is not because you were on the show, but your Eldar for, I assume they are for Epic Armageddon.
They are that scale. Yes.
Now,
but
go ahead.
I was going to say my intent for them is actually going to be a quarter scale 40K.
Nice.
So nice. I was having this discussion with a friend where I was like, I've got all this stuff. I'm looking at like expanding a little bit, but I don't have all that much more space in my house. But that new Eldar Codex came out with a jet bike detachment. And I'm like, man, I've always wanted to do a jet bike list. Like, what if I had really tiny, tiny jet bikes, And so I went with it.
That's fantastic.
Well, the first off, at that scale, the fade and stuff you have done on all these guys and the detail work looks fantastic. To the point where Shell earlier saw these and she was like, oh, I want baby Eldar. I'm like, I'm not doing baby Eldar. And then she hit me with well, maybe if I had baby Eldar, I'd play Eldar more. I'm like, I'm not falling for this again. So, I fell for it once with getting her Eldar army painted and twice for actually having a baby with her. So, not again.
You can't have both. You can't put them together.
That's right. These look absolutely fantastic, Liz. And I've been watching it slowly grow on our Discord channel, but just fantastic.
Well,
stunning work. And there's so much nostalgia for me, especially as one of my first Eldar army ever was an epic 40,000 Eldar army. So just seeing Eldar at that scale just makes me so happy. But you've obviously done such a better job than I did 30 years ago. These are incredible. Yeah.
Troy?
Yeah, again, they're cool. And I'm just wondering, does Liz make history? I don't know if have you ever had an Elite Choice person be the guest?
You know?
I don't
maybe. I don't know, ever Campbell or anybody else like that, maybe? I don't know. I don't think
I've picked anything
We'll say Liz
Campbell.
is the first. How's that?
I think she is. Yeah. And again, like I had my eye on this as we were looking for guests, and I had my eye on this. It may have been that I was looking at this and I was like, oh, Liz, like, let me see if Liz wants to join, but subconsciously, like, but yeah, they're so good. They're so good. Please keep us updated as this project continues. Josh.
Yeah,
I went with Dan Boyd's Raven Guard Vindicator.
This is all his.
And while I've heard Dan talk a lot about his models, obviously in 40K Badcast. He has largely shared them on Twitter, and I've never been on Twitter and never intend to be on Twitter. So I haven't actually seen that much of his stuff in person. So actually seeing these crisp edge highlights and really nice just masking with his red and black caution stripe on the shield of the Vindicator there. And Dan's not an airbrusher, so knowing this is all like hand done, and then he's an edging enthusiast, as he would call himself, for all these just really nice edge. Every single edge on that tank is highlighted, and it's just really, really cleanly done. So that was a call out for me. And I know Dan doesn't do a lot of weathering, but just that subtle weathering that he has on the seed shield, with the kind of where the like the tractor prongs are and some of the bolts and things like that. It's just a little hint of it. It's a nice touch. So yeah, Dan got my call out today.
I heard him talking about this on the 40K Badcast a bit, and then I saw pictures of it in play, like he was playing a game with it. And it is pretty impressive.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, Dan is edging enthusiast is no joke. He's got to be so good at edging by this point, because he does everything. It's crazy. Good.
Every single line, every edge that could be highlighted is and immaculately done. So
well done, Dan. Liz, what'd you pick?
Well, I think my first pick, he's already in the Hall of Legends, so I'll jump right over. But there are some really beautiful Eldar jet bikes while we're on the topic of Eldar jet bikes in the Discord. To go and find. But my official pick is Andrew's non-metallic metals Paragon warsuits, and they are work in progress still on the Discord. But man, the work that's been done thus far is just
so good.
Outstanding.
It's so good.
It really makes them glow, I think.
I'm painting these exact models right now, and so then I saw his and I was like, oh man, that's gonna look so much better than mine. But there's no way I'm doing non-metallic metal on anything. First off, I've never done it, and second off, no. but you're absolutely right. It looks fantastic. I had a conversation with Andrew as he was painting them. Like I had a little chat back and forth with him, just telling him, man, this is incredible work. You're absolutely right. They're going to be stunning.
It's beautiful. Now I'm imagining doing the regular size sisters trim in non-metallic metal on 100 of them in your whole army.
Nope.
Maybe at quarter scale.
Okay.
Yeah, non-metallic metals with a toothpick.
Yeah, it's a couple dots. Yeah.
Troy, what did you pick?
So I took a little leeway here. I got two. I took one from our community. I went on the Discord for that, because I don't want to leave the ICs out. I apologize. I am not really on Facebook. So I went to the.
You know what? Neither am I.
So I went to the Discord, and this model jumped out at me, and I don't know. Old Freeload and Ken is his ID on the Discord.
Yeah,
IC Discord, and it was just a really cool. I'm pretty sure it's a salamander. Kind of capped in. He's got, I don't have in this picture, I think there's some cool freehand on the shoulder pad in there, but I think the colors just really popped.
Yeah, it's a very
super clean, and I like that model too. Like that model is really
it's
cool.
A very bright green for salamanders, but it almost looks like Sons of Medusa green, but it works in this case. It looks really cool.
And
then go ahead.
I was just going to say, I commented to him on the Discord too, that he's got a really cool, dragon made out of fire, that freehand on his shoulder pad.
Yeah.
I think that's such a cool little touch for the salamanders and the dragon theme, and the fact that it's just made out of fire with the flame motif anyway. It was great.
Man, some people are so
That's
talented.
awesome. Yeah.
So talented. What else did
Just
you?
a couple triangles, Carl.
Yeah, I know. As Bryce would say. What else did you pick there?
So
Troy?
I went to the Basement of Death Discord, which has been around for a while, a little smaller than that. And we get a lot of good stuff in that. Currently, it has a lot of Trench Crusade stuff on it. But I pulled out my buddy Eric Clapsaddle. And I wanted a little bit of show off is we have a brand new squad for this year's Space Hulk, which are Space Wolves.
So nice.
Is that what it is?
And Eric basically kind of did some Space Wolf Terminators, and then we're like, I kind of talked to him like, we really need a kind of cool leader for that group, and he took a librarian and he turned it into a rune priest, and so he's got a rune priest and a Terminator to run that Terminator squad, and then so we've developed rules for that squad that's going to be new this year. That we'll have at
fantastic.
So he had this really cool picture he took too. So I wanted to share that.
That's fantastic. I'm so excited.
I appreciate the photo background also. Yeah.
He did a great, pulled out the stuff. So
fantastic.
Takes you right to Frienders.
All right. Well, I'll gather all these photos and I will share them both on our Facebook and our Discord so that everybody can see where to go and take a look at what we've been talking about. But let's go ahead. I think we just skip right into Workbench rather than take a break. And I want to talk about my hobby a little bit. I'm still working on my Paragon war suits for my Sisters of Battle. It's going to be probably a couple updates where I'm still working on them. But they're going well. They're not going quite as well as the non-metallic metal ones that Andrew did. But they're
still look great.
They're going to look great. They're going to look great when they're done. And I really like the way Morven Vol is coming out. I've gotten I feel like much better at my golds and that kind of thing. So I'm very excited about the way the whole project is working its way out. I'm having difficulty staying focused on one thing though. I think I have 3 projects on my desk right now, of which just one of them is the Paragon Warsuit. And then what happened was, the update for Warhammer 40K came out, and there's this really cool formation involving Bellicor. And the Shadow Legion, and so I have a Bellicor assembled, not painted, and I was like, well, what if I just start a little bit on this guy? And then Shell came out and she's like, oh, another project, huh? And I'm like, I should not be doing this right now. So I've put him away. I'm going back to the war suits. So and then last but not least, Shell, who is going with us to Adepticon this year again, she'd been planning this for a while. She went to get her nails done today, and she matched the purple of her nails to the purple of her Night Lords. And then before they sealed her nails, she came home and wanted me to airbrush and put the lightning bolts on her nails. So I did all that. And then she went back to the nail salon where they sealed them. So the woman at the nail salon was like, you want to do what? And she's like, well, how big of an airbrush does he have? And blah, 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 and asking all these questions. She was like, trust me. I was a little nervous. I've never done it on something other than a model, but they came out great. She's super excited about it. So I have to admit, it looks pretty cool.
Did you use regular model paints underneath the sealant?
Yeah. I just used Army Painter, the pink that I use under the lightning bolts a little bit, and I drew that in, and then I just used a brush and did the white. Just what's the super good paint? Monument Hobbies white. Yeah.
Pro Acryl.
Yeah, the Pro Acryl white. They look great. They came out a lot better than I expected. So
I saw the picture. They're rocking. I wish I was wearing nails like that to Adepticon.
She's pretty excited about it. And it'll match her army, and we're bringing her army. We got like a KR backpack and everything for her army. So she's pretty excited about that. Josh, what have you been working on?
Oh, I've been a busy boy.
Did you do your nails?
On the I did not do my nails. But if I have done some airbrush and freehand work on Steph's nails in the past, and then,
have you?
and then sealed them in. So it is fun. It's a fun little hobby fashion crossover. Hers were not as exciting as the lightning bolts, so that's pretty awesome. So locally, we have a Old World Escalation League that's been kicking off at Herrick Games. So I've been painting away towards that. So I have 800 points of vampire counts that are fully painted, ready to go, square based and ready. I played a couple games, which I'll talk about just very briefly since it's not 40K. I did just put the final touches on today of a Direwolf Titan for Adeptus Titanicus, which I am taking to Adepticon for me and Dan Osborne are playing in the Titanicus doubles event together on Thursday. So I almost never play with my Warhounds because in the lore, Legio Zastobiex sees Warhounds as a waste of material because they don't do a lot of scouting missions. They're more heavy engagement, defensive maneuvers, things like that. So I don't play with them that often for lore, like thematic reasons. But this time I'm only taking Warhound like Chastity Titan. So it'll be fun just because I don't actually get to play with them that much. And the doubles is just going to be a fun event.
They don't do it often, but they do it.
I mean, they will at Adepticon at least. There's such a fun part of the game. You can't not have some, but yeah, to be completely lore accurate, they really don't make them. But yeah, but they're such a fun part of the game. I couldn't not. So the Direwolf, I've actually had this model. Like I did the silver on this model probably a year and a half ago. And it was just like, it just kind of sat there. So finally went back and finished all the basing and decals and details and all the purple and all that. So very happy with that, how that turned out. And that was the last model that I had to paint for Adepticon, which I just finished today. So
nice.
Not 40K stuff. I'll talk about just super briefly because it's been a fun departure and rush. And it's largely because this is what I'm playing some stuff in Adepticon also because I couldn't get into any of the 40K flex events because they sold out so quick. Yeah. I'm playing Star Wars Shatterpoint and Bushido are the kind of the two big events that I'm doing aside from Adeptus Titanicus. So I painted up 4 squads for Shatterpoint, and then the last 4 models of my Bushido painted, and then based everything. I painted them like within a week after Adepticon last year, which is like, I need a little palette cleanser from Legions Imperialis last year, so I painted up most of that Bushido stuff. But knowing that I needed to add a few more models to it, I hadn't based anything. I was thinking about doing resin bases. But instead, I decided to just do a kind of a classic standard kind of wasteland base. My guys are kind of evil monks. They're all about the void and getting everything into nothingness. So
gotcha.
So having a kind of a barren wasteland was a nice touch. It was just really fun to paint. Shatterpoint's a 40 millimeter scale, so it's slightly larger model. So it was fun, just kind of departure. And then Bushido's a lot of cloth and things like that. So it was a nice break from power armor and kind of all the regular stuff that I've painted so much of recently for 40K. So
you are on the wait list for Saturday's flex. I see. I got the list, the registers and wait list. You're near the bottom of the wait list. You're not anywhere close. Sorry, bud.
I couldn't even get on the wait list for probably the first month of it being available, and enough people had like gone through it that it actually let me grab a slot.
I mean, we'll see what happens, right? And if I have an odd number of players, if you're around, we'll see. Yeah. The
other thing is 40K takes up so much space to transport that with everything else that I've signed up at this rate, I'm probably not bringing a 40K, a full army. I am bringing a combat patrol. Me and Dave Taylor are going to play a combat patrol game. So I'm definitely bringing that, but I don't know if I'll actually bring a full 2,000 point army just because of the space requirement for flying across the country. So we'll see. I will if I can, and I would love to play a game if possible, but all right. Yeah, it might not be in the cards this year.
Liz, what have you been working on?
Well, I feel you on that whole scatterbrain project kind of thing. I've been a big hobby butterfly myself lately. As you guys know, since we talked about it already, I'm working on the baby elves.
There you go.
My little teeny tiny Eldar. I've got some faux Vipers on the workbench. My Vipers were one of the only models so far that I haven't been able to find a good STL for. Because I've been 3D printing the tiny epic scale stuff. But I've got something that kind of approximates Vipers. It's a little bit bigger on my table right now. And it's not perfect, but I think it'll get the point across.
Nice. And then what else?
I'm also working on my Pyre rats. So these are my Skaven, and they are air pirates, so sky pirates, and they are also part of Clan Pyre. So that's where they get the
Nice.
fire motif from.
Nice.
And really in rule sense, they're more of a Clan Scryer, which is like the machinery and shenanigans of engineering that you can get up to with the rats in Age of Sigmar. But I'm really trying to run with the pirate aspect to them and making sure that everybody has at least some modification. So like these guys, typically the Storm Fiends would have like big bulky armor all over them. And I thought like how to address that in more of a pirate sort of sense would be like they'd just be shirtless and they've got pirate tattoos on them. Like one's got a ship and one's got like the wheel of the ship and another's got an anchor, and like they've just got little touches there, and then the wood and the rope sort of elements to bring them together with that sort of theme.
Are you actually playing Age of Sigmar, or are you just doing this for a side?
So this one actually came about because I have been kind of a fan of Skaven forever. Like in
Same.
Blood Bowl, I've got a Skaven team. And when I was looking at the time, Warhammer Fantasy, I was like, well, there's not a whole lot of inspiring forces for me. Like nothing really clicked immediately except for the Skaven. And so I started collecting little bits of Skaven, and the Age of Sigmar releases have had like a couple of different sets that had Skaven in them. And I've usually been on the sort of like, oh, I'll grab that box set and I'll grab that box set. And earlier this year, it was actually Christmas break at the end of last year, I was like, hey, I've got like a gift card from Christmas and I've got a week off between Christmas and New Year's. And I'm like, I got some money to burn, right? And so I go down to my local hobby store and they had no Space Marines whatsoever. They had like 3 or 4 boxes of stuff they already had like 3 squads of. And I was like, well, that's not going to work. So what am I going to do for this week? And then one of my friends said, hey, by the way, we're doing a whole gathering of the women at the store. And we're going to do like painting nights, and we're going to do Age of Sigmar nights where we do the Spearhead, which is like Age of Sigmar Combat Patrol.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's a perfect excuse for me to like dig into my pile of shame and drag out some of those Skaven that I already have, because I already have all the models that are in the Spearhead. And I was like, hey, I'll do that. Right. And so that's what I did with my week of vacation in between.
Liz, this is an interesting point you just brought up, which is somebody's organizing all the women come to your game store and hobby together or play or play, I should say. That's fascinating. Like how many participants do you have?
So I'd say the gaming nights we've probably had like 6 to 8 people show up.
Good.
And then the painting nights have been really, really popular. So the last painting night I went to was about 24 ladies.
That's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, we've got a kind of a big popular store, and it really touches a lot of different, because they're like, it's not an event just for Age of Sigmar or just for 40K or whatever. Yeah. Like you can paint Marvel Crisis Protocol, you can paint
models,
D&D models, whatever you want to do. And yeah, there's been some women that are like, oh, I've never painted before, and just painting with the group is really giving them the inspiration to keep going. And then there's other people who paint a lot and are just socializing as part of that group.
That's amazing. That's a fantastic community. I love hearing about stuff like that. What's the game store?
Yeah.
The Gamers Haven in Colorado Springs.
Gamers Haven in Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
Incredible.
It's a good place to be.
Yeah. All right. What else you got there?
So I'm also working towards a Crusade army.
Yeah. So
I've been bringing out my Drukhari, and I played a practice game, which we'll talk about a little bit in the games played section. And I knew that I needed a couple more special weapons guys, or a couple more special weapons models. And this was just another one of those sort of like, well, I've got a box of Kabalites downstairs, and I can just build these up and paint these real quick and get running.
Liz, your painting skill is fantastic.
Thank you.
This stuff looks so good.
The Dark Eldar are like it's color scheme, I think. Like I like it. I think there's sharp lines and stuff, but the contrast is really what sells these particular guys. Cause like I work on a Lamenter's model, right? And I'm like, I could put in hours and hours on all the freehand and the weathering, right? And then these guys are like, oh, well, just hit some lines, edge highlights, do a couple extra little colors, bring it up to white and pop, and they're ready to go.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like it does the same, since I use the same color scheme on the baby Eldar, I get the same benefit there of like the Warplock bronze versus the Gauss Bastard green, that fade, like the real contrast of green and brown.
Yeah.
And then little touches of pink, like it really draws attention.
Pops. It looks fantastic.
Yeah.
It looks fantastic.
Thank you.
All right, enough of the shenanigans. Tell us about Space Hulk terrain. I'm so excited. Yeah. Oh, wait. Let me stop you for a second.
All right.
I think it was you guys that gave it to me, and I still haven't handed it to Josh. But Josh, I have a mini Space Hulk thing here for you. Every time you leave the house, I go to my shelf and I'm like, I didn't give it to Josh again. I've told you about it, but
I got a bunch of stuff on my shelf that I'm supposed to give to you too.
These are super tiny. Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah. I mean, some of it's your stuff, but because you ran out of them at Adepticon last year, right?
Yeah,
and that's assuming
that was our. We always like to give stuff away, give a little something, and although that's last awesome. Year I might have bitten off more. I mean, that ended up being a lot more energy than It wasn't. What got me was the space, because when I was trying, all of a sudden when I'm like, oh, I got to pack all this stuff up, and then 30 of them, even though they were small, like 30 of
boxes.
Them, I'm like, how am I going to get these in and get them to Chicago? Yeah. So that ended up, I had a little moment of crisis where I was like, oh, I might need to call in and have one of my other buddies haul some stuff down, but it all worked out.
For those who don't know, the guys from Basement Death, Troy in particular, printed out like these small Space Hulk games that you can play. And they're maybe 8-9 inches by 8 or 9 inches. I mean, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I'll give, you can go to Dragon's Rest is the guy, and Ian is the guy over there who's done that. And he's got that model on there if you want to.
Oh, send me a link and I'll put it in the show notes. Yep. Right on. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about what you've been working on, Troy.
All right. So we're talking about quarter size Space Hulk and quarter size 40K.
Right. I have not,
and Legion Spirit.
I've not done a lot of, not done a lot of modeling like actual miniatures. It's really been kind of focused on the board. And last year I spent a lot of time just we redid everything from scratch. So there's a lot of 3D printing, a lot to get it on there. It was kind of base painted. And this year, my buddy Ty, I got to give him a lot of credit for continuing to prod me. Like, we got to do some weathering. We got to do this. And he basically took a few pieces, like, give me a few pieces. Let me try some stuff. And he took pieces over and started to work on them. And then he's like, all right, Troy, let's plan to do this. And I dropped a couple pictures here a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
We did a paint day on a Saturday, and I got my brother and my buddy Eric, who we showed his wolves, came over, and we spent about 8 hours and we cranked through. And Ty had a really nice recipe. I think that he learned a little bit from Caleb when he was in one of Caleb's classes around that. So he took kind of that and gave us, and we just went through a recipe and kind of dry brushed and weathered and got some additional color on every single piece.
They look fantastic.
That's on there. And even Ty, when we went through, he's like, I didn't realize how many pieces there were in this thing.
And you can't stop. We can't go like, we did half of them. Let's stop, because then it looks all messed up. Once you commit, you're in.
Yeah. And we were in, and we got, we went from about 3 to 11 with some pizza in there and whatever, and breaks and got through. And then I kind of have, and right now it is all, because I have to have it all set up before I can break it all down and pack it up. So I do have that last picture in there. That's the kind of the initial layout of what we got sitting on there. So that's been mostly, and there's a few little, again, a lot of I'll say my hobby has been 3D, because we added a couple more little 3D pieces that nice. I always end up kind of doing some slicing and dicing to kind of customize and then print out and paint and do some of that stuff. So that's been that. And like I said, I've been outsourcing, got to help. Again, a lot of my buddies in the group are great. I mean, Eric adding the new squad has been great and things like that. So, a lot of my time has just been organizing, because we're running, besides Space Hulk, we're running a bunch of other events at Adepticon this year. So we're so we thank. I was kind of joking with I felt like I was joking with Matt back in May when they came out to do the initial kind of scouting of the Baird Center and things like that. And I came out and met him and walked around, and I was kind of like, all right, Matt, where are we going to put Space Hulk this next year? And he kind of stuck a little Post-it on and said, all right, here's a room for Space Hulk. And I'm like, all right, yeah, right. And then I kind of hit him up a few later. I'm like, Matt, did the room survive for Space Hulk? And actually I said we were going to probably do some more. And so we actually do have a BOD room.
Wow.
So if you look for us in
sweet
little room, N108 on the very north side of the Baird, that's where Space Hulk will be. And then we're also running some of our 3D Zombicide games. We run some Marvel Crisis Protocol, cool terrain there. And also my buddy Ty, who I mentioned, is also we're doing a Imperius. What's the new role-playing game? The role-playing game.
Oh, really?
Role-playing game. Yeah. Imperius Maledictum.
Yeah.
He's running a couple of sessions of that, which is, again, he's our kind of forever D&D GM, but loves DMing. So he's got a cool story tied into the Space Hulk narrative.
Oh, nice.
He's done it. He's done some really great stuff. So if you've been playing a little bit, it's kind of funny how he's got a little bit tied in.
Was this up on the schedule and it's already sold out?
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, everything went in like minutes. So
I might just next year spend the whole day in the basement of Death Room. I got roped into running the 40K Flex, and I was like, it was so funny because Hank was like, oh, I got this idea, and I'm like, okay, and then we kind of iterated on it a bit, and then we landed where we did, and then Hank was like, so I think maybe 64 players, and I'm like, this is not going to get 64 players. Sold out.
Immediately.
Maybe it'll get bigger next year. Who knows? So there's clearly an appetite.
Well, I love the idea of the Flex. I think maybe because we're all of an age, not all of us. I think Carl and I are maybe a little closer on whatever, but that's my perfect, that's why I want to run a tournament where you play 2 games. That's it. Like you play 2 games.
Beyond that,
done,
I'm tired.
And because I'm done. Yeah. And a couple, I think the last, we'll get in, I won't go anything, but the last time I played 40K at a GT, that's what I did. I basically played the first 2 rounds, said, I'm good, dropped out, and went and sat in the hot tub at the hotel. And I was totally happy.
Well, I wanted to say there's been a gap really between the competitive end of 40K at Adepticon where I want to play in this, but it's going to be 3 days out of my 4 days at Adepticon.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's the other end of the friendly where, not everybody wants to drink a beer and then drop it down on the table as terrain, and there have been events in between on occasion at Adepticon, but really that sort of casual 1-day 40K event, which when you want to tuck in classes and an RPG night and whatever else while you're at Adepticon, it's really kind of the perfect fit to have something in there.
And quite frankly, if you drop out of the second game, we'll fill it with somebody, it's the idea is flexible, but also not none of the prizes are focused around winning. We have medals and everything. It's best painted, best themed, best sportsman, those kinds of things. And none of it, the only prizes you can win are just by playing, and then we do a drawing every time you play, you get an entry. So I had one person kind of write in, and they were like, well, I'm trying to decide between this. It sounds like this is what you're doing. Maybe I should go do the what do they call the big tournament? The
GT,
the championship.
Yeah.
And I was like, it sounds like you should do the championship. I'm not trying to dissuade somebody, but it's what you're looking for is not what we're doing here. So you're probably better off in the championship. It's fine.
If you're weighing between those 2 options,
choose the championship.
Probably already.
That makes your decision for you.
You've probably already answered your own question. Yeah. I
recognize a ton of names on the lists and stuff. And so, it's going to be a great group of people. And we're going to, I don't know if Shell and I talked about this, but we're going to break it down into 2 groups where it's hey, I want a more a difficult kind of push me competitive game. Not but I'm an experienced player. I want to play a tough game. Put your put your entry here, and then, hey, I want a super casual thing. I'm just having fun with friends. Put your thing here, and then we'll try to mix up, pair those types of people off against each other. It's all just about having fun. So if we hit 90 to 95% success rate, I'll be super happy. So, yeah. Okay. Well, I got to tell you, Space Hulk, Shell's probably willing to help play Tyranids multiple times.
Willing to murder me again?
I haven't. I don't want to scare her, but I figure she'll get excited, and I will definitely. So you can, if she volunteers, just you can tell her that I probably will take her.
She's already doing it the night we're playing,
right? Yep.
But she may even do it additional nights. I'll check with her because she's super into it. I mean, like I said, we literally bought all your old terrain and stuff. We haven't done anything with it yet, but she wants to run events using it, so. We got it. Yeah. So I think she wants the practice, doing it. So this is perfect for me. So, okay. So let's just roll into games played real quick. I haven't played any games since my last recorded, which was a week ago with Shell. But we have been preparing for the 40K Flex, getting things ready for that. So that's kind of where my attention is at the moment. I was thinking of going, I've joined a local event called the Maelstrom Mixer in a couple months. It's a big narrative event that they do down at this kind of bar and video gaming area. And they're doing a couple nights of it before that of Battlefleet Gothic. And never been a huge, we played it a few times. I felt like, these rules are dated, but if there's enough people interested in playing it and they're willing to put up with me, I'm willing to give it another go. So I might give some of that a go. I've got that Minotaur Space Marine.
Yeah. It's fun.
Fleet that I think would be fun.
It's a fun once a year game for me these days.
Yeah. It's a little too fiddly for me.
It's a lot of rolling dice to roll dice to see if anything actually mattered. But
see if you
it's of an age. Yeah. It's of an age. It shows its age in design, but still, it's a lot of fun.
Josh, let's talk about what games you've played real quick.
Yeah, so I played 2 500-point games of the old world, which are tiny games, go very quick. You can play a game in about 45 minutes with looking up rules because it's an escalation league, so we're learning. So one was a practice game, which is vampire counts on vampire counts, which ignores half the rules in the game because they're all dead. They don't care about psychology or anything like that. So it went very quick. Fun game against Rex, who I've known for 15, 20 years at this rate in Santa Cruz. But hadn't actually played a game with him in probably 10 years. So it was just a fun time. And then played a game with Sam, who is playing Beastmen, which I have not played against Beastmen in any form of Warhammer Fantasy Battle or Old World, etc. in probably, it's got to have been at least 20 years at this rate. So it was cool to see them on the table and had a fun game. Sam's a great guy and has a lot of similar interests in hobby. So and I hadn't met him before. We interacted a bit on Discord, but it's the first time we actually met in person and had a good connection. So looking forward to playing more games with Sam. Then Sky and I played a game of Legions Imperialis. This was a 2,000-point game. This game lasted, I think, a turn and a half, and this was what Sky quoted as, "I learned what not to do in this game," as every decision that he made is I shouldn't have done that. It was only his second or third, he's a learning game, and I was going easy on him and just kind of giving him advice on what he should do or what afterwards he's oh, okay, he would see what I would do on my side and be oh, that's what I should have done in my last movement. So it was cool to see the light bulb come in and those learning moments also. He's just gonna be all the stronger for it in the next game, and I was not trying to win at all. But
that is a game.
He was learning from his mistakes very quickly.
Yeah. I was gonna say that is a game where you make a move and then a minute later you're that was the wrong thing to do. Immediately. And I've used this example. I was talking to Shell about it where we were playing when you and I played with Sky and you're oh, you should really face your guy this way. I'm I think I'm going to face this way. And then the next round started. I'm I really should have faced him the way you said. So yeah, it's there's not a lot of forgiveness in that game sometimes.
Well, that's for Titanicus. So this is Legions Imperialis.
Yeah. Fair enough. I'm talking Titanicus. Yeah.
there's still facings and things like that, and that still matters. But we, my dice were absolutely terrible, and Sky's like, I did everything wrong. So we actually ended up being a pretty even match, but half the stuff on the board was dead after turn one. And Sky's like, let's re-rack. But then we had lunch, and somebody wanted to play a full game, and Ivan only wanted to do a small game. So Ivan and I re-racked and played a small game. I think it was only 1,000 points, maybe 1,500 points of Legions Imperialis. And this was a really fun mission in that you want to control your objective. You don't care about your enemy's objective, but you get points if you get into their deployment zone and you burn their objective.
Oh, I like
so that. You could kind of stretch out and burn this objective and deny them points and get some points for doing it, but you're just getting points for the fight in the middle or for holding your home objective, which just made it was a really fun and interesting dynamic for the game. So we had a super fun back and forth of the game and ended up in a perfect draw, which is always means a fun game was had in my book. So when the score is dead even and fun was had, can't go wrong.
Liz, what have you been playing?
Not a whole lot, to be honest.
Yeah. I
am a relatively new mom, so most of my games have been with my baby, trying to make her laugh. But after a couple of months with her, I was getting time off on Friday nights again is a possibility. And so just this last week, actually, I had a kind of a warm-up game for a crusade that we're about to start. So I had a 1,000-point game, first game in 7.5 months, 8 months, something like that. And so we didn't play with objectives or really any rules other than the core rules, essentially, and just tried to kill each other.
Yeah.
And it was my Dark Eldar versus a very nice opponent. His name's Noah, his orcs. And it ended up turning out my way because I was allowed to use my Dark Eldar shenanigans and just bring him over to one side of the board and then take my ships and go over to the other side of the board and keep shooting at him the whole time and just pick off the one unit that I wanted to pay attention to. And at the very end of the game, I got my Archon and her Incubi out and challenged Gaz and his Mega Knobs. Nice. And at the end of the day, my Archon came out victorious just because I rolled one more 2-up invulnerable save than he could and got him down.
Yeah. Nice. You said in the notes you put catch with the baby. I hope that means you're not throwing the baby back in.
No. The catch with the baby is I'll roll the ball to her and then she'll sort of play with it a little bit and then she picks it up and she waves her hand around until it comes out. And then I go and get the ball for wherever it came out.
There you go. And Troy.
Sure. Going back a little bit, my 40K is really about Kill Team lately. So I have, again, a few guys in there play it a little more often, and they're always like, "Hey, we're just looking for people to practice against." And it's easy to go to the shelf and pull something. In the past I had been playing with kind of the Gene Stealer cult group, but lately I kind of got tired of that and last couple of times playing with the Necron Kill Team and enjoying that. So it was a good change up. They're a little more punchy than the Gene Stealer people are kind of very squishy. Mm-hmm. You get a lot of them, but they're squishy. Whereas the Necrons can really do. I can take out a Marine in one shot, which was a really nice feel in Kill Team. And I like that the new Kill Team, again, nice, compact, nice strategic, move around. Again, we don't play cutthroat or whatever. It tells some good stories. And again, when my buddy Eric has Marines that he usually kind of reps on because he's been playing a lot. And then my buddy Ty, who I talked about, we threw down with the Inquisitorial Agents group, which was really interesting. That's a really interesting squad to kind of play against. A lot of fun, a lot of narrative kind of stuff in there. They even have a little scribe guy. I don't know. You're like, what is this guy doing on the battlefield? But it's kind of cool. So enjoying that. Yeah. Every once in a while getting Kill Team.
This is the new version of Kill Team?
Yeah, the new version. Yeah.
And how do you like that in comparison to the previous one or the original?
I don't think I played a little bit of the previous one. I actually did a couple actually competitive one in the day, and I feel like they didn't they made it just better. At least in my view, they kind of cleaned up some of the stuff that they had done in that that rebooted version. And I do like both of the previous edition, this edition, again, a lot better than kind of the one they had before, which are a little more, I don't know, they're a little, I think what's the right word, right? Kind of fiddly. We were talking about fiddly a little bit before, right? I think before, where now it's really tight game, and I think that's why it's got a lot of appeal now for people, because it's a really tight name, pretty.
I do miss the list building aspect of the original. The original, but I get it. And I see what they're trying to turn it into. So yeah, right on. Okay. Well, listen, let's do this. Let's take a short break. We'll come back. And when we come back, we'll get into the main topic of the show. I've got a few topics here I want to run by you guys, and we'll see where it all shakes out. So we'll be right back. All right, and we're back, and now we're going to launch into main topic here, which is the Warrior Lodge. And so we'll go through. I have 3 questions for each of you per session here. So we'll start off with question 1, which is, I recently read on a forum a story about a non-gamer dad, trying to support his 12-year-old kid who was very interested in Warhammer 40K, which I was like, I love this story already. The son wanted to get into the game. The father didn't even know where to start. And of course, some of the responses that people had, this was like on a forum, and some of the responses people had were super helpful, and some were just not helpful at all, or, sarcastic and that kind of thing. But this got me kind of thinking. And so this question, as Arya in the background knows, this question is really in 2 parts. Is the game in a state where it's too difficult for an unsupported player to get into? And what I mean by unsupported is somebody who doesn't have like a group around them, because when I got into the game, I got into it with a group of people, but none of us knew how to play, and we kind of helped each other. But I think most people get into the game because other people around them are playing, and they're like, oh, well, we can show you how to play. There are games I've never read the rule book for because I know how to play it because I played with people who knew. And so is the game in a state where it's too difficult for unsupported people to get into? And then what are some good tips and advice you may have for getting a new unsupported player into the game or hobby, if either way, if that's the case? So let's start with Liz this go around. Are you okay with that, Liz?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Well, I think right off the bat, is the game in a state too difficult for unsupported player to get into? 40K has always been a very difficult game to get into completely unsupported. Yeah. I mean, especially if you're talking about like trying to go to an event, right? Because like it's really not all that hard to get into 40K, the base version. But if you want to take something to an event, and the minute you show up, somebody's like, oh, you haven't read the FAQ and you don't have like the latest points values and whatever, like that's really tough. But that being said, I think the current version of 40K and Combat Patrol in particular is the easiest it's ever been to get into unsupported, in the sense of free rolls on Warhammer Community for your Combat Patrols. You buy 1 box, per player, right? And that comes with, you can get the cards, the data slates for all the rules for the models that are in the box, and ostensibly they're balanced against each other. So really, I think that would be the direction that I would point somebody.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that, because I went recently to, I was talking with Josh, I went recently to a game store, our local GW, after Shell and I had a conversation about this. And there is a pretty good starter set for 40K. I didn't realize at the time that walks you through each step of the way. And I didn't realize that. And I think this also came from a position of, for me, teaching Shell how to play. I took for granted how difficult the game is. Like we take a lot of these rules that we know by heart now kind of just for granted. For somebody brand new,
you've got so much muscle memory built up, over even edition to edition. As things change, there's still just so much, muscle memory, for lack of a better term, built in for how to play the game.
Yeah, Troy, what are your thoughts here?
I think it's too, like, there's no way. I don't think anybody can get in. I think you look at, especially where we are now, kind of right midway through 10th, there's so many codexes, so many rules, so many cards. You have app that's kind of behind a paywall. I think you'd go look on the internet and you'd get overwhelmed, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that the internet is helpful. Like, it should be helpful. Like, I should be able to do that, but I think you would literally get overwhelmed, right? You'd be like, and you'd get a lot of bad advice probably from that. So I think, yeah. And I don't know. I like Carl, as you were saying about, because I'm not the audience, right? I've not looked at a starter set to know if that's there, but historically they've been okay, but not great. So
I thought the fourth
I do think it would be really, really
hard.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I thought the Battle for McCrag starter set was pretty good for like walking you through the basics initially, but yeah. And the new one is actually broken down pretty well from what I saw. So interesting. So, what would you recommend, like, somebody, if they wanted to get into it, like an unsupported, how would you encourage them to? I think the community is a big part of this at the moment.
I do think there are some, like we said, the combat control, like Liz was saying, there are some things, if they get the right box, and again, they want to kind of learn on their own. I still do. Again, maybe it's me in my heart. I still think White Dwarf is great. Mm-hmm. Like for so many years between kind of ups and downs, like White Dwarf was my lifeline to this hobby. And even now, I think the current version, there's a lot of good stuff in there, right? And they come at it a good way. So it could be, like just reading White Dwarf might point people in the right direction, kind of get them understanding what's there. And then I think GW is getting closer to the game in a box kind of idea, where it's combat patrol. If I remember, I don't know what the current whatever, but I felt like even Leviathan, which was the 9th edition, was pretty close to like, hey, you could have two, out of the box, put them together. They were push fit. You could play something out of that. So I think
that's great if you want to play Space Marines or Tyranids, right? Right. But I think Liz and you both hit a point that I didn't think about at that time was the combat patrol approach. Is it used to be we would buy that box, that size form factor box, and it was, if I wanted to buy Eldar, okay, I get this in the box, and then I'd be like, okay, Josh, so now I'm ready to play, right? And Josh would be like, actually, you're going to need an HQ, and you're going to need this, and you're going to need this to get to this point value. But I think
this is a quarter of an army.
I think this is the most brilliant thing they've done actually recently, which I think was, even though I played one game of Combat Patrol and then I was like, all right, I'm ready for the bigger, but I'm more established. As you said, Troy, like I'm not the target audience, but if I want to try a new army, if I was interested in trying orcs, I could just be like, well, let me just pick up Combat Patrol, get it assembled, see if it matches my play style. If I don't really enjoy this, then maybe I move on and resell it or something, at that point. But I think that on ramp is a great way. Yep. Is a great way. Josh, your thoughts there?
Yeah. This is ostensibly the most stripped down, simplified, not simple version of 40K that there ever has been. So in some ways, that is true, and I think it is probably one of the better additions to get started with that we've ever had. Mm-hmm. If you are playing in a store and you are not, like, you just have your codex and you have a rule book, and like you can absolutely play the game that way. To Liz's point, like as soon as you take that somewhere else, then you're into like all the variables of things that have changed in FAQs and erratas and point adjustments, and see how many things are actually invalidated in your codex immediately. Yeah, that can be daunting. But like I think you can absolutely play and have fun in that bubble. But you're obviously going to need a community of some sort, whether it's one you're building yourself. Like I'm imagining a younger kid, like getting into this, they just buy the rule books. they don't even know Warhammer community exists. Like they have a rule book, they have a codex, like, okay, we can absolutely play this game. And I think that's fine. Like I think it is the most approachable version of the game that probably ever has been. Like I started in 2nd edition and we are so far away from where we used to be. I think things are very toned down and simple and approachable. And I would say the advice that I would have for is, absolutely Combat Patrol. Again, I've been playing 40K for 30 years, and I still love Combat Patrol because there is like rules are free. There are no FAQs. Nothing has changed. That not a single thing has changed since day one.
Right.
I mean, maybe some small things that were, printing errors, like more just editing, but they haven't adjusted anything. Like Eldar still have 12 fate dice, and it's really as it drops enough. But a bunch of their stuff, but they've been really smart about how they balanced it, and that Eldar have 12 fate dice, but the Wraith Lord can't use them.
Right.
They didn't give them the keyword that allows them to use it. So the one thing that would be the most abusive of that, they've intentionally left out of the ability to use them. So it is ostensibly balanced, as Liz said. Who knows how balanced it actually is? But it's fun. It plays well and it feels good. And every game of it that I've played has been very close and very fun. And regardless of experience level,
it's one of those things where I think back to how I got into Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid. I saw guys playing, they knew how to play. They finally invited me to play after I sat there and watched them play lunch after lunch after lunch at school. And they were older kids, but then they let me in and kind of showed me the ropes. I even for something like Dungeons and Dragons, for somebody who has no experience, let's say we're four friends and we're like, you know what? We've never played anything like this. Let's try Dungeons and Dragons. I feel like it would be very difficult to just pick it up from the get-go and successfully play Dungeons and Dragons without somebody knowing something about it at that point. Liz?
Yeah, I was just going to tell the story of, we actually had this scenario at my local game store relatively recently. It was a couple years ago, really, but there's this kid who's a sharp whip crack of a kid who was just into it, and he knew exactly what he wanted to do. And he expressed that same interest that I feel like a lot of us have right at the beginning, where instantaneously it's oh, this is a dreadnought. Look, it's got a dead guy inside, and he's blasting lasers, and it's, but his dad he knew nothing about it. Right. So this kid's name was Owen. He's 10 at the time. And really what his dad did was come into the store, find out when the 40K night was, and then come on the 40K night before bringing his kid in, and then sort of get the vibe of who was there, who was friendly, and who his kid he could feel safe talking to. And then brought his kid in to come and see the games being played and see if he actually liked what was going on, and would stand next to a table and say, hey, could we watch for a little while? And I know that's not completely unsupported, right? But until he showed up, he was.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a good point. I think that's good advice. Find a group, find where your local store is setting these things up. Because I mean, that was what got me into this thing, was the community and the people in the community. And actually, when I finally did run into somebody that I had a very negative experience with, I was kind of felt like a cold, bucket of water to the face, because people had been so friendly, and that kind of surprised me. So yeah, I mean, I think that the point is going from unsupported to supported. And I think the community, if they want to continue to see the game grow, we own part of that as well, making sure that people feel welcome and come in and have a good time.
Very much so. And don't overwhelm the new people.
That reminds me of a time where my dog, listen, normally I'd be very sensitive to the noise that she brings to the microphone, that kind of thing, but she's a 14-year-old Siberian Husky. I have very little time left with her, so anytime she wants to run around, she's going to run around. But it reminds me of a story I was telling Shell after we left. We left the Games Workshop store. Jeff and I had gone into the Games Workshop store to. We wanted to know how Lord of the Rings strategy battle game worked, and we were like, "Well, let's go have them show us a demo." And so we go in there. And we're like, hey, we'd like a demo of how the Lord of the Rings game works. We're 40K players, blah, blah, blah. We want to see how this works. And the guy's like, oh, sure, And so we go up to the little table or whatever. And he's like, okay, so, here they move this way and you measure their movement. And he goes, okay, so now you get into combat. And he goes, so what you want to roll is 4s. And Jeff goes, why do I want to roll 4s? And the guy goes, well, just roll 4s. And Jeff goes, no, you don't understand. I want to understand why. What is it that is making me roll 4s in this case? And the guy, it became very clear he didn't know how to play the game. He was going through like the Games Workshop demo of I'm a new kid coming to the store. Yeah. Hey, roll 4s, okay, and so Jeff
had to read the demo, but hadn't read the rule book.
Right. Jeff and I were like immediately like, all right, well, we've had enough. We're good. We're good. Thanks. We'll figure it out on our own. So I was, but to your point, Liz, I think it is a community responsibility, and that's a great story. That's a great story. I love getting kids into the game. It's super fun. Huh. Anyway, that I may think about kind of running something for kids locally at some point. So, okay. Anybody have any other?
Yeah. I mean, I was a 10-year-old kid when I got into it, and it was absolutely the local game store. Like, I just had a friendly community that was willing to play with a kid, and then like there was a bunch of people in high school, so there's slightly older kids, but then there was also people in like 30s and 40s, and they were all super friendly, accommodating, and willing. And like I lucked out that way that I had a narrative, accommodating, welcoming group, and this is obviously before the internet. So it really was just, here's your rule book, here's your codex, go play, and had a good group of people. And I hope that's still out there. The game, obviously you need somebody to play with. So whether you're building that community with one other person, you guys are kind of stumbling through the rules and figuring it out together. That's great. That's beautiful. Or ideally you can find a really fun and welcoming store. So, but yeah, community is absolutely clutch.
Yeah. All right. You got anything else you want to add, Troy? Or are we good to move on to the next?
I built my community. It was interesting. My brothers were my initial community. Like that's how we started back in the day. I've been playing it since Rogue Trader. And it was us on a carpet. And then we kind of would play, and then we went to a few small events and kind of like learned this a little bit. And then, and really it was interesting, whatever we are now, almost 15 years that we got together was the Basement of Death guys, which was like a reinvigoration of the hobby. Because it was, at that, whatever it was, I was probably 40 some, and you're like, oh, am I getting out of this thing? And now it's, thriving and everything together. And that was kind of this revitalization of the community around the game. So
yeah. All right. Question 2. As I was doing my research for this episode, I kept seeing increasing rumors of 11th edition 40K. It seems like people were already ready to put the stake in this vampire, that is sucking the money out of my wallet. And I recognize that Games Workshop has put out an edition every 3 to 3.5 years or so, like kind of at this point. Like that's what people say is like, oh, this is the pattern. I think that pattern has held true for maybe the last 3 editions. Prior to that, some editions lasted significantly longer. But I don't feel like 10th edition has even really had time to mature yet. It launched in June of 2023, so we're really approaching June of 2025. I mean, we're not even 2 years into it at this point. And by those, we have like another year. But I think it's got more legs than that. Like, I think this can run for quite a while, and Games Workshop could kind of approach like how they're monetizing it, by not, yes, here's a new codex and here's a new, like I don't think they need to go that route. But what are your thoughts about the current edition? Is it showing its quote unquote age in terms of the cycle? And is it ready for 11th edition already? Or do you feel like there's still a long way to go? And Josh, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah. I don't think we need an 11th edition yet at this point. Like even if they pull out an 11th edition next year at some point, say next summer, like I would think it would feel more like a 10.5 edition where all codexes are still going to be valid. I don't think they're going to obsolete anything codex wise. I don't think it's going to be a full index reset, anything like that. The state of game for me is not in a place where I really need any adjustment to it. I don't think it does competitively. I think competitive players are pretty happy with it. I'm not a competitive player, so that's speculation on my part. But from what I get, from what I hear out there, I think everybody is pretty happy with where the game sits and the adjustments that Games Workshop is doing, especially with points and balances and erratas. And, oh, this thing is broken in the rules. Let's actually address that. Again, more for a competitive mindset. I think that's fixing a lot of the issues that people are seeing. And they have even done a couple things like adding the pivot rule, which, that's an adjustment that they've now baked into the 10th edition core rules. And I think some small little things like that is really all the game needs. And honestly, and from where I'm sitting, I think it's totally fine as is and wouldn't touch it for a while.
Okay. Troy?
I'm going to say we will get an 11th in summer of 26.
Wow. Okay.
But just because I think it's because GW is a publicly traded company. They know that that's the way I think that's why we've seen the pattern is they know we can get growth. We get sales when we do a new Age of Sigmar, when we do a new kill team, but I kind of agree with you, Josh, that I don't think I don't play a ton, but I think the game's in a good spot. I think it's going to be a re-skinning of the 10th edition with a little of that. So I will balance my cynical with saying that maybe the every 3-year, edition thing gives them a chance to, I will say, reset the game a little bit without bloat. Because I think what we saw in some of the cases where an edition lasted a long time, they felt like we had to keep adding things to it, and we got into the 7th editions, the end of right, and that. So So it's a little bit of both. I think they're always going to get us now, like, hey, we're going to get that big box out because they know it gets a bump in sales, gets a bump in that. But maybe they can use it as a positive to kind of keep the game at a certain level of complexity and whatever, right? Around something.
It's a very good point. Liz, you got anything to add here?
Only that I agree with what's being said so far. I mean, I agree with Troy. I don't see them missing the cog on that particular gear, Yeah. The 40K in one summer, and then AOS the next summer, and then a specialty game the next summer after that, and then start the cycle. Like, seems to be a strong pattern. And with a publicly traded IP, like, it seems like that's
so
baked
fast
into the system.
It feels so fast to me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it feels like man, do I want to invest in yet another new edition as it comes out? And I wonder how much of that causes some attrition, or if people just end up buckling under and just go, "Oh, fine, I'll just do it." Josh.
I feel like it feels even faster now because they are doing quarterly changes to the game also. So whether it's just a point adjustment or an errata FAQ, whatever, like, the game is in constant state of change right now. So even if the rules, like, it enough is changing already that it doesn't need a big rule set or reboot or anything like that. And this is interesting too, because we're not in like 9th edition or 7th edition where we had the huge rules bloats. There's not a lot of fat to cut out of the game right now yet. And we have all these codex supplements and things like that. But it's like, if you're playing that faction, you are really just using that one thing. And it's not like you need 4 books to play a game anymore. You've got the rule books. Once you know the core rule books, you're probably set on that, and you've got your faction, which if you're using the app, then you're not even bringing any books to the game.
Yeah, that's how I play it. Liz?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that was a good point, Josh, that I think the modern detachment system really helps avoid some of that bloat, in the sense of, like, they can just keep cranking out detachments, and those are just alternates. You don't necessarily need to bring or know all that stuff unless you're playing with that new version of it. So I think that's been a really smart thing that they've done in this edition that probably lets the rest of us feel like there's not so much bloat going on yet.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, until Troy brought up the bloat thing, like, I hadn't really considered that the longer it goes on, I mean, then we get the people complaining about, I have to bring all these books to the table, and I have to, every release. Because I was thinking, like, what if they released they used to do these Munitorum manuals. What if they released a Munitorum manual that was all just new, detachments? And it's like, yeah, but then people are going to complain they have to bring that book to the table. Although, like, personally, I wouldn't. I use the app, and I think it's awesome. But I can see it. I see what you're saying. I don't know how they get around that at this point.
Yeah, I think they try. I think there's people in the studio, like, they know, but I just feel like they can't. Like, you can't help yourself, right? Over time, it's like, we got to do something new. People want something new, and even though they know it's not the healthiest for the game, you just end up in that place.
And since they're not focused, Like, I mean, you have a Crusade and such, but since they're not focused on really like campaigns or, you know, that kind of thing, it just feels like the focus right now is really, really heavily on the competitive scene. You know, I mean, those things kind of go by the wayside, and they probably aren't huge sellers either, you know, unless you're packaging them with models that people desperately want, you know. But then again, Games Workshop's the king of FOMO, so I don't know, maybe they've got it figured out. So, all right. Let's move on to question 3. So, at long last, the Eldar, or rather the Aldari, if you're nasty, have received model updates to their aspect warriors. Alas, so we can no longer make jokes about the Aldari being mistreated and having the oldest models at this point. So what's the next faction that deserves like a model range upgrade? You know, make your case for why your faction of choice should get a sweeping model upgrade. And I'll let Troy start with this one, since he's the know-it-all with the edition.
I don't know if this is a hot take. I don't know if this is a hot take or not, because I was thinking about this, because I think we're in a pretty good shape. And this might be my personal.
It's hard to have a hot take on this.
Adeptus Custodes. I think, because I think, and I did a little bit of research, because my thought is that range kind of came out 2015 before Primaris. And I really think they're undersized. They look squatty. They just don't like appeal. Like, I love the idea of that army and I think, but every time I look at the models, I'm like, they're not. And that, especially now with Primaris, they're
supposed to be like 12 feet tall, right? So
right, I mean, they just don't like. They don't. The scale's not quite right, and I would love to see them get Primarisized, as I would call it, right?
Yeah.
To do that, and even I think the Sisters of Silence part of that is, again, kind of dated a little bit, and the stuff they've done with the Sisters. I think they could do some really cool stuff there. So I think Custodians would be my pick, and some of that, it would get me excited. I like the army, but I just don't like the models. I get turned off every time I kind of get. I shouldn't say turn off. They are cool. They're just like, they could be better.
Right.
So
I don't know. That's kind of a hot take, Troy. I don't know. I think that's a pretty good. I think that's a pretty good observation. I didn't even really consider that until you brought that up. What about you, Liz? What are your thoughts?
Well, I got kind of a multi-part answer.
Sure.
So, I think we had this same discussion on the Discord recently, and a lot of the consensus came down to some of the oldest models still in there are Drukhari, and like the main range especially. And me personally, as a Drukhari player, like, I find like maybe it's just like me getting to be an older player, like where I'm like, oh no, these models look great. Like, what are you talking about? Like, they were brand new when I got them, and you couldn't believe the things they were before, in comparison.
Yeah, I mean, it had been like 15 years since they got updated, and then they got this whole plastic range, and I still think they look really good.
I still think they look really good too, and I think they've got like a similar kind of quality to the classic Eldar of like they've got a style that's built into them, that like even though technology has increased and every once in a while there's a pack that like blends into a leg, right? And you wouldn't get that in a modern model necessarily anymore.
That's true.
Like, it still has a style to it. But that leads me to the point of, I think that there's a decent number of ranges that don't necessarily need an update, but maybe an expansion.
Yep.
So just for example, like while we're on Drukhari, like there are several sub-factions of Drukhari, right? And the Kabalites, which is what I prefer to play. In the current codex, there's 3 Kabalite data sheets, and one of them is a character, right? So like there's a squad of Kabalites, there's your Archon, and then there's your Ravager counts as being in your Cabal. And then you've got dedicated transport, sure. But if you want to play that particular sub-faction, there's not a whole lot of variety, especially since they just recently took out the Tantalus, which was another very famously Cabal sort of oriented big Forge World ship and centerpiece that brought a change of scale to the army.
That's a crazy cool model too, by the way.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm such a fan. It was a pain in the butt to put together.
I'll bet.
But it still looks great. So I think there's a couple of ranges like that. And personally, I think that it's going to sound so cliche, but Space Marines, specifically in the line of like specializing the non-codex chapters or even the codex chapters with more than just upgrade bits. I mean, like if you look at what Space Wolves used to be compared to what they are now in terms of the level of customization in your models that differed from a codex Space Marine chapter, it's just far and away, like, you know, these days it's almost back to second edition days where like Blood Angels were just red Space Marines and Dark Angels were green Space Marines. They didn't have anything different about them except for the paint color. In the Primaris world, it feels that way a lot more than it did at the end of the Firstborn era.
Yeah,
but
we saw some.
If I were to,
we saw some.
Go ahead.
We saw some really big advancements in the technology of making plastic models towards kind of the endish of the first founding era, right? And I mean, when I'm talking about technology, I mean like the plastic molding technology that Games Workshop was. I remember the first time I saw the Space Wolf models that were specific to Space Wolves, and they had come out, and people were like, "Holy cow! Look at all this detail they put on them." Now you look at those and you go, "They can do so much better than that now." It's crazy how good it's gotten. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Josh, what are your thoughts? Sorry, Liz. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah. As a specific Space Marine, though, I feel like model refresh and expansion, I think the Grey Knights need to get hit personally.
Yeah.
Because they're all firstborn size, you know, and they're so specialized that you can't, like, in my opinion, you can't really, like, put a Primaris with the power sword and it's like, oh, that's my Grey Knight. Like, no, it doesn't look the same as it should.
Agreed. Josh, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think Grey Knights is a good call. Even those models are still gorgeous. They're just tiny.
Yeah.
For me, it's it would actually be orcs. And I feel like they've gotten half of a model range in new releases, and these are mostly new units that have been added to the codex. But if you look at some of the old staples like the Mega Knobs and the even just the boys.
I was going to ask, did boys get a refresh, or are they still the old kit?
Still the original old kit. There's kind of the Cruel Boy style where it's more like the different style of orc. But these are, again, new units, different aesthetic to orcs. Storm Boys are the ones that are really coming to me. I would love to see a new unit of Storm Boys in the orcs. And I'm not an orc player, but they have so much character and so much personality, and the models are fine. But I feel like if you look at the age of the models and the technology in the models and what could be done and what they've shown that they could do, I think orcs deserve the glow up probably more than anybody.
Well, that's an interesting point. The Grey Knights I thought about as well, but I was trying to steer away from Space Marines a bit, and I feel like the Leagues of Votann have kind of only had like a half a release. Like
they're half a codex.
Yeah, I feel like they really need like easily twice as many units as they have to be kind of a viable, like, oh yeah, you know, I think I'll invest in this army and feel like it looks different than the army on the table next to me.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see. So I guess my point is there's plenty of room for them to grow the hobby without going back to my previous question, 11th edition, right? There's a lot of stuff they can add, but is everybody going to buy a Leagues of Votann expansion? No. I mean, Leagues of Votann players are, and it will probably draw some new players in, but it won't draw them in like a Leviathan box set. You know? Sure.
Yeah. And I think there's several armies that are out there, like World Eaters. I feel like that's half an army right now.
Yeah.
First Children, even though they just released, it's like half an army. Votann, similar, half an army. Like
there's a lot of vehicles.
I would rather see those guys get rounded out.
Yeah. But there's a lot of vehicles that like Emperor's Children can't take and such is my understanding. Right. I haven't looked at the codex yet, but this is what I'm going through. So okay. All right. Well, you know what? Let's just actually keep going. Let's just roll right through the break and move on to question 4, which is recently Josh and I had been doing a lot of discussion around narrative gaming versus tournament gaming. And the crux of the conversation was really around Games Workshop's lack of support of narrative style gameplay and the swinging of the pendulum away from open narrative gaming over to very heavily into the tournament scene. So my question is kind of, first, do you agree with that take on it? If yes, what would you like to see change? Like what types of products do you want to see produced, and what type of actions would you like to see Games Workshop do? If no, then make a case for us as to how Games Workshop is supporting narrative style play. Please sell me on that. So let's start with Troy this time.
All right, you're going to make me dive in here. I will say no. Like, I think they are supporting narrative. Mm-hmm. I will point at Crusade. Like, there's a whole section in every rule book, every codex where they basically carved out a whole, which we didn't have before, right? Like, here's Crusade, here's the narrative thing to do there. Right? You look at White Dwarf, they have a lot of stuff in there. You go on Warhammer TV, there's probably as many narrative videos they have on there as they do match play on back and forth. So I think they're doing it. I think the studio wants to do that on there. I think some of it is that we're skewed so much by what people, I'll say, we're getting what we wanted, right? Like, for so long, it was like, there was this focus, like, if people wanted to hear about the competitive, they're not paying attention to competitive. And when they put a spotlight over there just a little bit, it's been amplified, right? Mm-hmm. And I think some of that is the content creator world we're in now, right? Where, you're especially not us, not you, Carl, but every other podcast out there, right, is talking about, kind of competitive play. Because what something I wrote here is there's nothing to argue about in narrative play, right? There's nothing to kind of, people always get drawn to that. So,
that's
I
interesting.
Do think the narrative is right there. So yeah,
maybe that's why Josh and I always agree on stuff, because we're not arguing about it.
All of our hot takes we agree with.
Okay, I've got counterpoints to that, but I'm going to let Liz go first.
No, that's good. Hey, you
as
guys
do
brought
I.
me to disagree. I think that was.
Oh boy!
I'm glad you brought it up.
The ringer.
You actually raised some interesting points, though, like some things I hadn't considered, but you're wrong. But that's okay.
Lots of people tell me that. That's good.
Liz.
I think this is going to be a hot topic, man. No, I like what you said, Troy, about like there's nothing to argue about in the narrative, right? Because like I think we've all talked about it before. We've all heard about it and talked about it with our friends of like, you can be insanely invested in your D&D campaign, right? And you can be talking to somebody else that plays D&D, and like, if you spend more than 5 minutes talking about like your session or your character or whatever, people's eyes roll back in their head and they're like, yeah, I don't care, man. It's not real. Like, whatever happened in your campaign, it has no connection to my campaign. Nothing's happening. Right. So like, I think that's part of the aspect of narrative, in the sense of like with competitive play, you can find something to connect to, in the sense of these units are good and these units are bad. And this version of the table layout that we're playing on, like, I know what you're talking about and I can picture it in my head if you're talking about competitive play. And I think that's easier for the community to talk about, like you said. And yeah, I feel like narrative, we also have this spectrum where I think we've commented and agreed before in the past of like, narrative and casual are not the same thing.
Correct.
Certainly not necessarily. And it's actually quite a bit harder to create a narrative environment than it is to create a competitive environment, because so much of it has to be customized, not just in the creation of it, but to your particular group. And if you expect your group to participate in the way that they're building it, like, you have to allow for that, and you have to allow for that flex to come in. And so there have to be holes for things to fit into, and paths for things to take. So I don't know. It seems like, I mean, I'm a big narrative player. I love it. I run events, right? But if I go to put on a combat patrol event, it's like, oh, that's like a night's worth of work for me to print out packets.
Yes.
And set up terrain and whatever, like, it's really not that bad, versus the last time I ran a narrative campaign, like, I prepped for months before I even told anybody I was doing it, and let out the sign up sheet, and then on top of it, during the campaign, I'm like, oh, well, these guys did this and these guys did this. And Joe wrote about his Space Marines doing something else. And I'm going to write that into the next mission and, like all that kind of stuff. It's a lot more of a commitment to do narrative.
Yeah. It's for somebody who's been a forever DM as well, Troy, it takes a certain level of commitment. And you're 100% right. Actually, you hit a very interesting point too, which is, setting up a combat patrol event is like super easy. It's like, okay, we got a couple missions. Quite frankly, the flex is for the most part super easy. Yep. There's no overarching narrative. I'm going to have some pre-printed missions in case you don't want to play with cards, and you can say, hey, pick one of these missions and go play it, but otherwise play with your cards. It's fine. It's a garage game type approach, but there's no storyline being driven by it or anything. It's just the storyline is have fun. So it's a very good point. The distinction between casual play and narrative play are two. It's a very interesting line to draw. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
sorry.
Well, I got a lot more to say.
Keep going.
Well, and I will then sort of steer that into, I think it's less that Games Workshop isn't supporting narrative play, and more so that it doesn't resonate in a public way or as easily as the competitive play does. And so it doesn't appear on a whole lot of other people's radars. And I mean, they do put out content. Like Troy said, there's, Battle Bunker in every White Dwarf, which is really cool in my opinion. I kind of forgot about because I don't have a White Dwarf subscription, but I picked up one recently and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that they've been doing this for 2 years. They've had an international gaming club in White Dwarf that has narrative missions every month, or at least semi-narrative missions, right? And then if you look at the scope of like not just 10th edition, but the recent few editions, I was actually in touch with Jesse on the Discord. He's been putting together a list of like all the narrative books or non-competitive supplements that Games Workshop has put out. And across the past 3 editions, 8th, 9th, and 10th, it's over 30 books that they've put out. I mean, that includes Psychic Awakening at the end of 8th, which it was like, it's arguable, right? So like if you cut 8 books out of that for Psychic Awakening, since those had a lot of rules in them more so than narrative, there's still campaign books, crusade books, like physical supplements, not just White Dwarf stuff. And me personally, I was super drawn in by boarding actions and boarding actions at the end of last edition. Like, it is narrative gaming. Like, it's basically the definition of narrative gaming. Like, you've got maybe 3 missions that are like, oh, there's 3 objectives in the middle of the table, go get the MacGuffin, and then you win the game, right? And then everything else, which is like another, I don't know, 45, 50 missions and boarding actions, are all like, okay, so we've punched into the hull of the ship, and as a defender, you can, turn on the vacuum and suck people out of this particular section of the ship. Or like, oh, we're trying to get to the control panel in engineering, or like, this half of the board is the flight deck, and this half of the board is the supply area underneath the flight deck, and there's these elevators that go between them, and like, there's all kinds of narrative elements in boarding action. It's just
agreed.
not.
I think it's one of the best books they've put out this edition.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's got all kinds of cool stuff in it. And then kind of my last point on the topic is the grand narrative, right? Like, I know, Carl, that you have gone to
the Tacoma.
You went to the Tacoma Open, right? And you went to the narrative side of that. And I can't tell you what happened between the grand narrative and that version of the narrative that you played, but like, I am part of the 40K narrative.
Yeah.
So like, in the original grand narrative, I came in cosplay, I came as a character, right? And I played through, I was having good games, right? And then I talked to the general a couple of times off to the side. And then, I was walking by him once in the hallway, and I saluted him. I was like, sir. And he's like, hey, come here. And like, we had this little discussion, and he's like, you want to do something cool? And I was like, obviously.
No.
He's like, all right, cool. But yeah, like, no. right? But the next day, because he had visited me while I was actually playing against Grinial and beating up on his orcs, the next day he called me in front of the whole Imperial faction and gave me an award.
That's
right?
cool.
He pulled something off of himself and tied it onto me.
That's super cool.
And I've got the picture here in the show notes of me kneeling in front of him while he gives me this honor, right? And my character's name, Lady Artemis de Rey Adelarix of
oh my
House
God.
Adelarix.
You know what? That picture, I thought it was AI generated.
No, man.
That is cool.
No.
That is cool.
So I did Photoshop in the background, right?
I see. Okay.
We were just.
I thought it was a backdrop now
hall.
when you were saying. Gotcha.
No,
gotcha.
unfortunately, no. Like we were just in the hall and with it surrounded by a whole bunch of other people who were playing an Imperial faction, right? And he had the whole speech and stuff, and so I photoshopped into the background like what it might have looked like in real life.
That's so
right.
Cool.
But the night house that I invented and this character that I invented and the story that she's invented, like she's in the official brief, the debrief, the summary of the after action. So like as much as I daydream about like if I get really good at spinning my lightsaber, they might hire me to be in a Star Wars movie one day. It's never going to happen, right? Like it's never going to happen. But my character's in the lore of 40K. And I can't say that Games Workshop's not supporting narrative play when, as lucky as I was to have that opportunity, there it is, right?
Yeah. Well, listen, I'll let Josh go next, but I got some thoughts. I got some. That's amazing.
You're both wrong.
Yeah,
but that's amazing. Yeah.
No, I will, one last tick.
Go for it.
Was that like I will have to note that Jesse sent me a list of these 31 books over the past 3 editions. There have only been 3 Crusade books that were in 10th edition. So 3 things that were not competitive play. So it's like.
Well, considering 11th edition's right around the corner, those are going to be. If you could send me that,
out of here.
If you could send me that list, Liz, I'd love to see it too. By the way,
sure.
Josh,
sure. Go ahead, Josh. Apologize.
No
problem at all. Yeah, so some excellent points. Absolutely, both of you, which I disagree with, but. No, I actually agree with all your points, but for me, is it enough is the question. Like grand narrative, that's amazing. How many players are actually able to attend? It's a pretty small percentage. Crusade, fantastic. It is absolutely a nice addition. We've been asking for it forever. It's not enough for me, and I don't think this is a case of my free ice cream is too cold. I think we need more. We need more depth. It needs to go further. For me. Boarding Action also fantastic. Love that book. Probably my favorite supplement that it will ever be released for it. But even that, like with the Eldar Codex, I was just flipping through it. It's good too. Yeah. The Eldar Codex release and Boarding Action and any other codex that has come out since Boarding Action comes in, it's really hard to use new codexes with the existing detachments because they are Boarding Action specific. So there's units that don't exist, rules that have changed, and everything is so specific in Boarding Action for, you get all these units, but they don't get this rule because it doesn't work for Boarding Action. So like I would love to see a support of like, let's at least update some of the existing Boarding Action factions so that players can continue to play and enjoy with that. And like, obviously I could play with index stuff there, but the app's updated. So you don't have the stats there if you're going that way. So you actually would need physical cards or something like that to play that way. So there are some obstacles to being able to play. Like nothing has invalidated the existing Boarding Action things other than some of the codex update itself and how the app's updated. And there's just some obstacles to play that way. What I would love to see, and this is something that Carl and I were talking about on our latest Patreon episode, but it's like writing kind of narrative primers and a 3-game story arc mini campaign. But if nothing else, what I would really love to see, and I think would be a fantastic way to support narrative play, harkens back to the 5th edition Battle Missions book.
Yeah,
where each kind of faction had a set of 3 missions, like, oh, here's a mission where like you're on the offensive, here's one where you're on the defensive, here's one where you're kind of neutral. I would love to see something like that, but actually build in a small primer and a little like narrative objective, not just don't play for points, play for a narrative objective, and give a primer of why each faction would play against another faction. Like that's what I would love to see for narrative play in a pretty simple supplement. Like obviously it would take time to write all this, and like why would these factions fight each other? And then maybe like if we had each kind of pairing, and then here's 2 or 3 scenarios for each of those pairings of like, here's a narrative mission. Here's why Chaos would fight Eldar. Oh, is it Slaanesh? Maybe there's an extra reason for that. Like, and so after Carl and I were talking about this just a couple days ago now, like I've written 5 of these missions just for like, I know Carl and I are going to play a game with his sisters and my Eldar. And like, I already wrote a narrative primer for that game that I want to play. And we're both still painting armies. We're not even ready to play, but like I've got a primer and narrative missions written for that. I've got one for Brian, our local Brian Harvey, who is like super excited about his Emperor's Children with the new codex releasing. So like I wrote a primer for that, and I wrote narrative missions. There are no, like, he will not score a single victory point in the game. There is no primary objective, secondary objective point wise. There's just like, are you achieving the objective for this mission or are you not? And I would love to see that in a more official capacity to really support narrative gaming in that manner. And I, like, obviously it's not going to be popular in a tournament format.
No,
but it's already having that conversation for people in a lot of ways that match play is having right now. Like if this book presents here are these 2 factions, and here's 1 to 3 missions on how these 2 factions narratively encounter each other. Like, hey, let's just play one of those. That sounds great. And you know, have at it. And like that conversation has been had. You're on an equal kind of understanding, but also like it's narrative. Like it doesn't need to be equal. You don't necessarily need a book to have that conversation for you. So obviously, like I'm putting the work into. I know Carl's doing this for you and Travis, the little mini campaign that you guys are going to play together. Yeah. So players can take it upon themselves to do that. But for me, like that is so exciting and very much the way that I want to play 40K right now. So like obviously I'm putting the work into making that effort come to life, but I would love to see something in a more official capacity that does that and brings that to a lot of people who don't necessarily have the time or inclination to put that work in, but can still enjoy. So yeah, that's where I sit.
Troy made a really interesting comment that kind of stuck a dagger in my heart a little bit. But mostly because he's not wrong in this case, which is, for a long time, the community was like, you don't focus on competitive play. You don't focus on competitive play. And now they are, I would argue heavily are. And here we are bitching about, why aren't they supporting us? And so, I mean, look, if these are the things we have to complain about in life, we've got it made. But it's a valid point. There was a long time that there was not this focus, and there was frustration over balance of armies, and there still is. There's always going to be, like, it's cyclical, but it is a valid. I think that's a very valid point. As far as like Crusade coming out, recently Josh and I went to the War on the Shore in Hawaii, and in discussions afterwards, one of the tournament organizers was like, well, what if I have like this storyline and narrative over the tournament? And we're like, you're just slapping lipstick on a pig. It's not, that's, to your point, Liz, like that's not truly narrative gaming. Is narrative gaming, and what got me started down this, as I've said on the show several times now, was listening to Dan and Campbell talk about tournament play and how it's difficult to define narrative play, and especially difficult the more people you involve in it. Like it's an incredibly difficult thing. And so it's probably not as visible because it's not as easily digestible. One of the things that irks me about the competitive play, and you've heard me talk about this as well, is the terrain. It's just like, if you walk into a game store, and I was just having this conversation with some other people too. If you walk into a game store and I showed you 2 different pictures, and I showed you the tournament table, and then I showed you, the table we played our 4,000 point game on the other day, Josh, that 12-year-old unsupported kid is going to be drawn right to one of those things, because inherently this game is about story and it's about this, and somebody's gotten their war machine into my 40K when it comes to these tournament tables. And it just, it grates me so much. But Josh, you made an interesting point talking about, you want to see these primers and yada, yada. And as we were having this whole discussion, the four of us, and I was listening to you guys, I was like, and I wrote a note down here. I'm like, well, if Games Workshop's not going to do it, maybe we should do it. What I'd love to see is like a first edition DM's guide for how you run narrative 40K events, right? Like, here's all the options. Here's advice on how you, and there's tons of this out there on websites, but a compiled, like, well thought out by people who run this kind of stuff with, here's how you can run a map campaign. Here are some different approaches to that. Here's how you can run a campaign that's, not map based, but point based, or, what have you. And like, seeing all that in one place in an easy reference manual, and then fill it with a bunch of primers. Here's 100 reasons why Chaos would be fighting such and such. Here's 100 reasons, maybe 100's a bit extreme, but you know what I'm saying? Like, here are these seeds that you can use to begin your narrative journey. I think that's a very valuable product. Again, visually, you and I, Josh, play the game for its visual, dynamics, and
I call it cinematic, right? So we're telling stories, it's looking good, like visually stories, narrative stories, like things that happen, like we remember moments that happen in the game, and not just because like, I rolled a 6 and I won the game, and like, on turn 5 I turbo boosted and stole all the objectives.
My guys came around this clear base of a terrain piece, and he couldn't shoot me because on the other side of a pipe. And I'm like, what? So for me, like, as you were talking about this, all of you, I started getting ideas on like, maybe if somebody were to put together like a large, book or PDF or something that's like, here's all these ideas from all these different corners of people. Like, there's probably value in something like that for helping people who want to get in the narrative format. Troy, to my point, another big piece of contention for me, maybe it's just my perception, because it doesn't get the visibility that the tournament play does these days. We'll go to Adepticon and they have video footage of what's going on and who's winning and the top games are getting commented. There's no video footage of your awesome Space Hulk adventure that's super narrative, by the way. And so, I think there needs to be people championing that as well, because I think when visually you see that game, like, to me, that's more interesting. That being said, the guys up at Play on Tabletop, like, they've talked about, like, their narrative stuff doesn't generate the amount of votes. So maybe we're in the minority here, Josh. Maybe it's just us.
But how much of that is you don't want to watch somebody else's story? Like, you'd rather participate in that
Liz's
story
point.
versus... Yeah, like,
good point.
I think that's a huge part of it. Where competitive, like if you're playing a competitive game, like, okay, I know these outliers parameters. Like Adeptus Titanicus, one of my favorite games to play. I think it is the most boring game to watch because you have zero agency in any of the resource management and movement that happens in that game.
Yeah,
and like that is what makes the game so enjoyable. But watching somebody else do that, like, when you don't have any agency, it's something really is missing from that. And I feel narrative. Similar to the D&D story of listening to somebody else's
Liz
character.
raised a good point with that. Like, I've been the guy rolling my eyes, and I've also been the guy telling you, oh, and then I did this, and watch the reaction of the person. Like, I'll shut up now.
and yet there are extremely popular, like Critical Role, for example, like D&D stories where, like, if you're into it long enough that you can connect with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a D&D campaign with a group of online friends that I've known for a long time. And we just started chatting about Critical Role like 3 years ago. And all of a sudden was like, hey, you guys, like, you want to run a D&D campaign in Exandria? And like that got all of us to connect and keep going. So I think if you could have a champion, like you said, like some sort of narrative champion of the factor of play on tabletop or like mini wargaming or that kind of caliber of battle report that does narrative all the time and sort of a consistent narrative, then like maybe you could spawn a whole group.
It won't be Josh and I. I'll tell you that right now. That is a lot of work, buddy. That is a lot of work.
Do not have that time.
Troy?
Yeah, I think, as we're going through this, and I think we've all kind of said it, but narrative is hard.
Yeah,
right?
super hard.
It's harder to do that. And as you talked about like Josh, when you talk about primers and writing up, my little bit, and this is where I go a lot, is how do I know the scenario is going to work? How do you know it's going to be fun on the table? Because the problem with narrative is a lot of times you're not going to play test it. Your play tested is your play. Yeah. And unless you have, and what I wrote down is, and again, I hate to use the space hog all the time, but the idea, like, do you have a GM or can one player, are you guys good enough friends that you're not? Because sometimes even narrative, like I still want to win, right? I still want it to be fair. I want it to kind of have, because there is a fun part to that, right? Or if you are, again, sometimes like, let's have some fun. And then are we comfortable enough that halfway through, we're like, oh, this isn't quite working.
Let's adjust.
Are we okay with changing this?
Yeah, I've been
this. And sometimes you are, and sometimes, right, maybe you guys, you're not, the person you're with isn't quite on the same line with you. So that's why I think narrative is hard, right? And I like that idea, Carl, where you're like, it's more about how could you give the building blocks? Like, here's some points about how you could build a good narrative scenario, right? And take the building blocks and build the story around it, and around some of that. And some of that could be like, hey, look at a competitive mission and then take it apart and put it back together as a narrative where you like remove the points and put in there, but still keep the structure because that's a solid scenario, right? That'll play. So
yeah, Josh and I have been talking a little bit about this, and I've been talking about wanting to go hard on narrative in terms of, I just feel like there's so much competitive content out there, and we kind of want to champion this style of play. And one of the things I was talking about was running games here at my house, like having them feed into a narrative. And as I was kind of working through, I want a map and I want this, that, and the other thing. I was like, but how do you make this such that you're playing in it too? And so, it has to be like, there's a way for you to win. And until I finally realized, like, for myself, I think I'm going to give up on I want to be part of winning the overall campaign so much as I want to GM and steer like the whole campaign. I think it requires that for like ongoing play, and then, updating people as to what's going on and such. So I've been giving a whole lot of thought to this lately, but you guys have raised some really good points. It's got me thinking. So I've taken a bunch of notes here on my little notepad. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I think every Crusade book has the role of campaign master, and they dedicate like a page to somebody has to be the campaign master, and they don't necessarily have to play. Yeah. In fact, it's probably better if they don't. But just as another comment, I've pulled out a common theme of some of the stuff that we've all said so far, and it's spun off an idea for me in the sense of like, in addition to why are these armies fighting each other, I feel like you could have scenarios based around the terrain itself.
Sure. Where Third Army on the table.
Exactly. I mean, you've got the City Fight book that you mentioned before. Mm-hmm. There was a book in like 6th or 7th edition, I can't remember which, that was like siege battles. And like, these guys are the assaulters and these guys are defenders. Yes, and you get, it was,
oh, what was the book? It had a Imperial Fist on the cover.
Yeah. And it's a huge element to some of the lore in 40K. And, like fortifications came with the defenders and the attackers got, engines of war.
There's Planet Strike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
that's a good point.
I think the idea of having scenarios of like, well, why are we fighting in this city? Or why are we fighting, like, here's, a manufactorum, why are we here? Here's a shrine world, why are we here? So that you expand and address both points of like, oh, competitive terrain's always ruins and it doesn't look right because it's completely unnatural building layouts, right? But if you have this idea of, well, here's a manufactorum and here's like the tank line that you're trying to stop,
Right.
And you have to get to this point and this point, and the objectives actually mean something, but you don't necessarily have to show pictures of what that terrain looks like. So someone can represent it with whatever they have in their collection, but the concept of the story is very narrative, or the concept of the mission is very narrative, as opposed to a lot of the current mission types, which are very much like, here's the green zone, here's the red zone.
Right.
Put in whatever you have in the middle.
I got to tell you, this conversation's got me more excited about it.
And the 5 missions that I've wrote, like terrain is written into those missions. Like this one is going to have zone mortalis terrain. This one is dense ruins. This one is going to part of this fight is like half the tables in the webway. So have cool like tunnels and weird stuff. And then, sorry, just blanked on the point I was going to make with that.
I think I think that book was called Strongholds, Liz.
Something like that. Yeah,
I think that's what it was called. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Well, listen, I think we've beat this. We beat this enough that I've got some great ideas out of the beating it took. So I appreciate the input from all of you, actually. But let me move on to question 5, because we're going to start running short on time here, and I can smell my wife's cooking in the other room. We have seen the game evolve over the last few years, as well as advancements in the lore as they've begun to move kind of the timeline forward, which quite frankly I was always against, but now I'm kind of enjoying it. Things have moved forward in Warhammer 40,000 in the way that Games Workshop interacts with its customers as well. I would argue that Games Workshop used to be very much a British company. It was like, we'll tell you what you want, don't tell us what you want. Now they're very open to like hearing suggestions and such. If you could influence the direction of Warhammer 40K franchise, what would you prioritize? Expanding the lore, refining gameplay mechanics, exploring new media adaptions? What are your thoughts there? Let's start with Josh.
Yeah, so for me on this one, I'll actually keep it pretty simple. And rather than going into a bunch of new directions, new lore, new expansions, more gameplay, things like that, I would be more interested in expanding what is there. It was very similar to what we talked about with the Leagues of Photon, Emperor's Children, things like that. Like, just get everybody kind of up to that same page. Like, you've got a fully playable, developed army, support it, update, boarding action, things like that. So my answer is actually more of a simple, just like, let's just update and get everybody up to that same kind of playing field, so that the illusion of balance, or the variety of models and things like that are more well-rounded out, faction to faction.
Sure.
And less about expanding the lore, progressing the story further. It's just like, let's catch everything up before we jump forward.
Okay. Liz, what are your thoughts here?
See, I'm gonna flip myself on my head, right? Having been a big defender of narrative gaming in the last question, I think what I would influence is the actual narrative, like the meta narrative of 40K going forward, to make some legit movement. And what I mean by that, like, I will use Age of Sigmar as an example. Every movement in Age of Sigmar, like, it really seriously changes the story of the overall universe. I mean, they started out with like the Realm Gate Wars, like Chaos is taking control of all the mortal realms, and Sigmar's opening up the gates, and he's trying to reconquer everything. And then we moved into the idea of like, well, Nagash is being a dick, and he's trying to take over the entire underworld, and nobody can have their afterlife. So everybody's protecting themselves from going into his control.
Right.
So you've got like Sigmar obviously is claiming his own souls, and you've got these people claiming their souls, and these people claiming their souls. And that just makes him more and more pissed off. So they had a whole big fight over that. And he had this massive like spell that was going to suck everybody down and kill the entire mortal realms, and turn them all into zombies. And it would have worked, except for the Skaven just tweaked something at the last moment and set it off crazy. But like, that amount of magic came out into the world and became the endless spells, which had a huge impact on the actual gaming state, right? And then you keep going forward, and every edition of Sigmar really legitimately changes the story and the overall environment. Whereas the 40K narrative, like I feel like rather than telling new stories, what we're doing or what we're seeing is more environments to fight in, more sort of systems. Like you've got your Vigilus, you've got your Pariah Nexus, you've got the Great Rift and the dark side, the Imperium Nihilus, but like nothing is happening in those things.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you look at it on an us scale instead of an in-universe scale, like the Cicatrix Maledictum ripped open 8 years ago, and since then nothing has happened. Like in terms of Abaddon was like, bam, I'm going for Terra, and then nothing. You know, like
this is all part of his plan, Liz. It's a very long-reaching. Well, your mortal mind can't comprehend.
But it's not even the classic, you know, like, oh, well, he really meant to do 12 Crusades and the 13th one, you know, like we failed before, but we didn't actually fail. Like, it's not even that anymore. We're just not hearing anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you have, I mean, they're kind of moving it forward. If I can just make one point here, which is the whole point of 40K from the get-go was always supposed to be it's 30 seconds to midnight and then everything is going to go into oblivion. So I think the very act of like moving the story forward kind of defeats like the original purpose. Whereas like in Age of Sigmar, it's a whole re-envisioning, and I think from the ground up they've made it so that they can kind of advance the story here. But I think the advancement of the story is either the Tyranids eat everybody or the Necrons somehow are able to like withstand it. And then, okay, that's yay, you know, like we win, you know, and so but I see your point. Like, yes, the Cicatrix Maledictum has been ripped open, which was a massive change in 40K. You know, quite frankly, I would like to see more books and novels and setting stuff on the other side of that, because the best representation I ever saw of that was The Emperor's Spears, written by Aaron Dembski Bowden, where it felt like, oh, you thought the 40K galaxy was post-apocalyptic? No. Look at the other side of the Cicatrix Maledictum, where, you know, you have Space Marine chapters that are suddenly like, well, I guess we're all pirates now because, you know, I mean, like things are going to hell. They can't get supplies. They can't do this. And I think they're kind of delving into it a little bit with this Nachman Gauntlet thing, where it's like, yeah, well, here's controlling the access through this thing is this one, you know, kind of bridgehead of a couple, but like this is the major one. But I know what you're saying. My frustration with the 40K setting has always been it's focused too much on individual characters and their achievements rather than this is a galaxy. Like every time I start to comprehend like how big a galaxy is, and then like you see on telescopes, you're like, oh, and look, there's 1 million galaxies out here, and I'm like, my brain cannot wrap its head around how big it is. So I mean, why do we care what Dante did? Or Abaddon, for that matter, other than the fact he ripped the galaxy in half. But I mean, realistically, it's like, why does it? There's 100 billion stories we could tell that are not about any of these characters.
Yep.
And to a degree, I've said this to Josh, and I think I've said this on the show before. We miss an opportunity to just like start some fresh stuff, like, Marnius Calgar's been killed, you know, Dante's been killed, you know, here's another character to begin to explore like they could re-envision that in some ways. I know people would be upset if their character was killed, you know, but you know, okay, so it's one model. You know? Anyway, that's my take on it. Josh? Oh, you already went. I already went. Troy?
Yep.
So I went a little different when I saw the 40K franchise. I mean, I think the game is the game. It's going to keep going. I really think where it's that new media stuff, right? I think Secret Level blew the doors off.
Oh, yeah.
Like, here's I wish they would kind of change their, like, release the stuff that's behind the Warhammer TV paywall. Like, I don't know why, you know, I get it, but I don't I think there's opportunity. I think they're seeing that again. Space Marine 3 just got announced, right? I think they realized how much Space Marine 2. Well, I think they've seen, I don't know. Yeah, we don't know the numbers, but I think they saw so many people come from Space Marine 2 to like, oh, what are these models? What are these things?
Sure.
And so, and I know GW, right? They've always been selling models, and I don't know if, like, I think maybe they see the writing on the wall that selling models may not be
the future,
the thing that keeps them in the next 30 years, right? But their IP, the Warhammer 40K IP, is where they can, continue to make money and grow and whatever. And it'll be interesting. I don't want to go into our next question, but
this is why you invited Troy.
That media area is there to go. So
that's a really good observation. That's a super astute point. I mean, they have to leverage the IP in different ways especially in the world of 3D printing, where it's just going to get easier and easier. They have to do it.
Yeah. Their future is 100% in licensing.
So let's go into the next question, because literally that dovetails nicely into it. And this will be the final question, which is, it's no secret that Henry Cavill, and by the way, let me just say right now, I'm a huge Henry Cavill fan. I have been since Man of Steel. I was like, I know people either hate that movie or like it, but I'm one of the people that's very much like that movie. I love his portrayal of Superman. I've loved everything he's been in. I thought he was great in Mission Impossible. I think he's been great in a lot of stuff. So it's no secret Henry Cavill's heading up this Amazon effort to bring 40K to the small screen. But the more I think about this, and I was recently talking to somebody who works for GW, the less I'm convinced that a live action imagining of Warhammer 40,000 is going to work well. Especially without a massive budget. Like, I think it's just too fantastical. There's potential exceptions to this, such as, people keep throwing around Eisenhorn, or, they could. I think they need to do some new character, new story, new thing, all to create their own. If you do Eisenhorn, it's not going to match people's vision. Half the people will think this isn't what I expected. It needs to be something its own thing. And it needs to be more human-centric than Space Marines and aliens. I mean, you can have them in there, but they can't. They're not going to be able to be the focus of the show, film, whatever they're putting together, unless you're spending a massive amount of money to make it look decent. So, I could see this in animation, and I don't remember who hit the secret level point. I don't know if that was Liz or Josh, but Secret Level was fantastic.
Troy, either one. Yeah.
I don't know if it was Liz or Josh, but it certainly wasn't Troy. But I mean, like, I could see, that kind of thing more readily accessible, or quite frankly, just, sell animation. I just, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, oh, this could go so wrong so badly, if it did. But what are your guys' thoughts on a subject we honestly know nothing about, because nobody knows what they're doing over there. What would you like to see realized by Amazon and Henry Cavill under his direction? Kind of make your pitch for your ideas. And I have two more points to throw out, and then I'll go to Troy next, which is, the other thing I always see people say is they should do the Horus Heresy. No, you should not. Like 100%, you should not. Number one, to do all those Space Marines is like prohibitively expensive. Number two, it's not accessible. Like, and one of the interesting things about the Horus Heresy, when people talk about it as a point of starting to read about 40K, I'm like, would you watch The Empire Strikes Back before watching Star Wars? Would you give up some of the greatest reveals of all time because, it's such a backwards approach? Like every book of the Horus, almost every book of the Horus Heresy would reveal something about the world you've been living in 40K that, like, you didn't know, and you're really ruining the surprise if you were to start there. So anyway, enough of my complaining about that. Troy, you were about to kind of breach into other media, which is why I want to go to you first. What are your thoughts here around the efforts of Amazon and under the spearhead of
I have cautiously optimistic, right? I think it's hard, right? It's hard to get any TV show to come together, right? Yeah. When you behind the scenes, right? Do you have writing? Do you have that? Henry Cavill knows the material. He's that. I just don't like, he's not the one with all the money, and he's not probably in complete control. I kind of compared it to, and Amazon, I don't know, has an okay track record. And Liz, as you were talking, I love the Critical Role animated series on Amazon. Amazing. But that was completely financed and controlled creatively by the Critical Role guys, right? Yeah. And that's amazing.
By the way, I didn't like the first 2 episodes of it, but by the 3rd episode, I was in, and then I was like, "Oh, I'm enjoying this.
It's amazing."
Yeah, and so that's why I just there's so many ways it can go wrong, and and how do you pick? Like you said, where's the right scope of that story? Mm-hmm. Like, I think the thing to do right is, we need to have a character-centric thing, but then the worry is that's not really 40K is at some point is Space Marines in battle. That's what people know it as. So how do you get them in? You almost have to get them in there and then zoom down or something, right?
Yep.
Which is, I can't tell you how to do that, but that's how I see it going there. So, and then here's the idea I have, and I'm a huge Dan Abnett fan. Love every single one of his books. I just reread Double Eagle. Has everybody? I don't know if people here have read Double Eagle.
It's fantastic.
In my mind, that's a that is absolutely a cinematic movie, very character centric, right? Based around, I won't give too many spoilers, but based around a fighter squadron, the people in that group, and their adventures in a very 40K environment and war. I think that it's funny. I reread it, and then I watched I watched Midway, the movie, because I'm like, I need to see airplanes fighting and some of that. So that's, I think, like, in some ways you could pick like any kind of go in the Sabat Wars. You don't necessarily have to do Gaunt's Ghost, but like there's your thing. I think here's a battle, here's a very 40K environment, and then zoom down on a squad, whatever.
Like that's actually a really good setting, because like when Marines show up or Chaos Space Marines show up in those cases, it is rare, it is infrequent, and then they have like some impact, I think, but it's very 40K. Like I wasn't even an IG fan, and my friend Kentaro kept trying to get me to read Gaunt's Ghost. I'm like, I want to read about Space Marines. And then I read the first 3 books of Gaunt's Ghost. I'm like, where have you been all my life? Why didn't I read this? You know? So Liz?
Well, I'm going to have to read Double Eagle now.
Oh, if you haven't, it's and the sequel, which it was 20 years ago, Double Eagle was written. The sequel, Interceptor City, just came out. And interestingly enough, Dan does this thing where he's like, 20 years has passed for these characters since here. So it's pretty
real time.
Yeah.
Dang. They've grown with you, or outside of the,
That's right. You're revisiting old friends. So what are your thoughts on Mr. Cavils?
So I agree with the general concept of it has to be human centric. I mean, it's really there's a significant appeal to the Imperial Guardsman story, right? Standing against all of this nonsense, everything is trying to kill you. And like, I've always tried to explain it to people, just getting into the lore of like a Space Marine back in the old days, right? In 5th edition or whatever, if you were inside a tank and it blew up, you took a strength 4 hit. If you were inside a vehicle that exploded, you took a strength 4 hit. If a Space Marine punches you, you take a strength 4 hit. Like that's the idea of a Space Marine. And if you look at like a Hormigaunt, which is nothing compared to a Space Marine, it's like Velociraptor size, dude. Right. Can you imagine a wall of them coming at you just as a normal person? Like it's insane. And doing the human-centric story, right? I think along those same lines, I think that there should be a Space Marine in it, or a couple of Space Marines in it. But they should be, just this like
not the
lethal alien presence that like there's a scene in one of the Siege of Terra books, like one of the later books, like 8 or something like that, where like these Space Marines are fighting and like they're just stepping on guardsmen, and guardsmen are dying because like, oh, that was the most optimal foot positioning for me to block this sword. Right. And I'm having this scene in my head of like, the main character in whatever this 40K show is like running through this building and like just boom, like 2 Space Marines come tumbling through the concrete wall and they're smashing each other. And he's like, oh my God. And then like he dodges out of the way and the Space Marines go back outside and then something else comes through the wall. And it's just like, like that's what I really want.
That's the amount of Space Marine that should be in it. Yeah. I love this idea. Yeah. I love this idea.
And I think there's 2 kind of concepts of how you want to tell the story. So like you have the Eisenhorn Inquisitor sort of situation, which really lends itself to like an in media res kind of storytelling where you just show up and they're in the middle of a mission. You have to kind of figure it out. Mm-hmm. And that applies itself to like the people that already know the lore in the sense of like you can have Easter eggs and tidbits and stuff, right? And that gives you sort of a mystery plot that other people can try and figure out. Or you can approach it sort of the classic hero's journey where you've got like this podunk villager that gets, picked up by the mentor person and thrown into the larger world with a character that can explain some of the stuff that's going on, sort of the classic Lord of the Rings archetype or the Wheel of Time archetype where you've got like an Imperial Guardsman on like an agri world. You could even have him like plowing the field behind something, right? And he gets thrown into a war against Tyranids or orcs, or maybe his parents die and he gets sent off to the Scala Progenium and becomes a scion and then gets sent on special missions or something like that. And yeah, I agree with the human-centric aspect, and then just touching on little aspects of the variety of different warfares that you could have in the universe, or stories and characters that you can have in the universe, and just the crazy weirdos.
The Imperial Guard approach, like the kind of Gonskos approach, would be really pretty solid. I can already see like the opening scroll is like basically the whole, in the grim darkness of the far future is only
totally.
Opens up on, guys in a bunker, looking at plans or something as explosions are happening and the roof is shaking and dust's coming down and they're like, some battle happens, and then it's like, you know what, this squad needs to go out and do this particular thing, and that could almost a Saving Private Ryan in 40K. Not that they're trying to save Private Mork or anything, but like or is it they need to go and capture this chaos general or capture, whatever the story. Like I can visualize that much more easily than I can visualize the Horus Heresy on the screen. And listen, I've seen the first season of Wheel of Time. They cannot do a big war like Horus Heresy.
Well, no, not like Horus Heresy. But to be fair, Rings of Power has some pretty big battle scenes.
Well, Matt Weeks hates me for it, but I quite enjoyed Rings of Power. Josh,
I know
he's a purist about Tolkien. Josh, what are your thoughts here, and then we'll close it out.
Well, on Rings of Power, it's largely Silmarillion based. And there's I enjoy it. It's well done. Anyways, let me push my glasses up. I completely agree. Like the scale of warfare in 40K is way too vast to just have massive battles. It would be too abstract. You're not going to engage a new audience to that. Like you need that anchor, the human element, the human story.
You could do a huge wide shot. You could do like a huge wide shot of like the entire battle taking place.
I think. Yeah,
but going down to the details,
I think it's important to demonstrate the scale of war, but I don't think you can have a show focused on that scale of war.
Right.
So even looking at the Warhammer animations, like you look at Astartes, for example, and that's 5-10 Marines at most in this really interesting tactical, and there's zero narration or anything like that. This is just the story is unveiling itself with questions and mysteries and things like that. And I think that's a cool way to tell a story.
But it's also and if you're going to have it to us, right? Like,
absolutely,
notoriously, British grim dark quote unquote IP fails in the US. Look at Dread, right? Dread's a fantastic freaking movie, and I begged people to go see it. Just like I begged people to go see Dungeons and Dragons, this latest one, not the earlier one. And it just, for some reason, that doesn't resonate broadly in the US. I'm hoping this is different.
Which is a shame. It's a shame. But yeah, so that being said, like, I think that's the best case, that you showcase Marines, but I don't think Marines is how you want to tell the story either. I think it has to be the human element. And for me, in my mind, it is absolutely an inquisitorial retinue, because you get to touch on so many different points throughout the universe. You get to show how big it is, and there's a reason for them to go different places. And for me, I would even have the antagonist be something like Gene Stealer Cult, which you have all these hidden, they human, and then like you get a reveal, oh, they're not human, they're attached to this thing. Now let's zoom out and we can like find out, let's learn about Tyranids. We go to a planet, Necrons are rising up. Like, you have this kind of built-in reason of why they're going to all these places and getting exposed to the greater 40K universe. And you're very anchored in this human element, but they have the access, they have the reason, they have the ability to go to all these different environments and showcase the grandness of 40K in that way. And I think in an episodic show or something like that, especially, you can have that overarching narrative, but you can get from point A to point Z in so many different ways with all the steps and like different introducing the weirdos, as Liz was saying, just 40K weirdos is like, that's such a huge part of 40K. And I think that kind of lens is definitely how I would go, at least approach telling this story.
Gene Stealer Cult you could do with prosthetics and practical effects really much easier too than even than a Space Marine, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you, as they, are traveling for different areas, are revealing different things, like they're encountering different areas, but it's still a small human-ish group that is exploring that greater universe. And like, as they learn more, the audience learns more. And I think that's a good way to introduce somebody who's new to the IP to 40K. And that's they like, as the Inquisitor Warband is discovering more, the audience is learning more. And like, obviously those of us that have been, in the lore for 30 plus years are like, we know where this is going, or we're
relishing all the nods to things. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think they can do this in such a way that's very informative and accommodating and welcoming, but it's not just like a fan service. It's like, we'll appreciate it, those of us that are in the know, but I think even if you don't know, they could tell a really good story this way that would engage anybody, as long as they like a grimmish, darkest story.
All right, well, that's it for the questions I've got. Let's take a short break, then we'll come back and close out the show. All right, and we're back to close out the show. Just a few quick couple announcements. The first thing I just want to say was, Troy and Liz, thank you so much for joining us. Like I was saying during the break, you brought up some really good points that kind of stopped me in my tracks. And I really like when somebody brings something up and makes me rethink my mental state on something. I think it's always a good thing. So thank you both for your insights, and it was super helpful.
No, thanks for having me.
Oh, man.
It's been fun. I mean, we don't even have to record this, and I would sit and chat with all three.
We should set up some hobby time where we're all just painting and chatting. I've been talking about doing that lately. It helped me get back in the groove of things. So, we've got, please leave us reviews on whether it's iTunes or whatever podcast app of choice that you're using that allows you to leave reviews. We greatly appreciate it. Helps get the word out a bit, and we absolutely love it. And we go through and read them. We have a Facebook group. The Facebook group is still doing well. I have left Facebook in a personal capacity. I still have an account to manage the Facebook group, and I still react as the independent characters on that Facebook group. So I'm still engaged with the Facebook group. It's full of great people like Liz, not Troy, because he doesn't do Facebook, but they're constantly posting stuff on there, which just looks fantastic, which additionally is on our Discord, and you can join our Discord at any time. And we have the Patreon, which is, if you really want to support us and you want to hear some extra content, Josh and I released the episode with Shell a little over a week ago, about a week ago. And immediately after that, Josh and I released an additional hour on Patreon, and we're going to look at doing more and more of that as time progresses here. So now that we're done with our vacations, we can get back to actual work.
Back to work.
Yeah. Troy, you got anything you want to add? Don't talk up your Space Hulk thing, because
I will just
it's hard enough to get into.
We also do a podcast called Playin and Slayin. We are also members of the Goonhammer Media Network.
Yeah.
Thanks to our good buddy Raph Cordero over there, who you'll see Captain Raffi all over the IC stuff there.
He's awesome.
Becoming a really good friend of mine that I met through
my Lord Pusher.
Through that. So through that. So you can find Playin and Slayin. We talk about a little bit of everything. We are not 40K. We talk about whatever we happen to be playing around that. And we also talk a lot about books, because Ty and I like to read. So we talk a lot about kind of books we read and things like that. So
speaking of which, because I turned you guys on, I think, to Dungeon Crawler Carl.
Yeah. Yep.
Have you done book 7 yet?
No, I'm behind. I think some of the group has. They're gonna jump on it. I'm only on like book 3 or 4. I think 3.
It's the best thing ever.
I've enjoyed it. I do enjoy them. Yeah, I have enjoyed.
Liz, have you listened to any of it or read it?
I have not listened to the latest book, but I had the new Stormlight Archives book came out about the same time as the new Dungeon Crawler Carl, and my husband decided to re-listen to the entire Stormlight Archives up until the current book, and so we just started the most recent Stormlight Archives book, and then
that one's huge too, right? Like it's
huge, man. Yeah, the audiobook is like 40 or 50 hours. Wow. Like it's great. It's a huge amount of content for one Audible credit, so that's right. It's a good pitch, and it's an excellent story. But I'm very much looking forward to the new Dungeon Crawler Carl book.
It's something, let me tell you. I think I was gonna say Seth, what's his name? MacFarlane? Seth MacFarlane's production company bought the rights to Dungeon Crawler Carl. But here's another example, going back to our discussion about Henry Cavill and the space, the Warhammer Amazon thing. This is a series that I'm like, you cannot make this a live action series. Like it's too insane. Like I guess you could, but it would be really like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy original TV series, kind of weird. Like, I really feel like animation would fit this thing very, very well and be super enjoyable. But man, if you haven't read Dungeon Crawler Carl at this point, I don't know how to push it any harder. Like, it sounds like the dumbest thing ever, but it is the best.
It is so good. It is so good.
And the audiobook is just on another level. Yeah. I mean, there's people that are like, I can't listen to audiobooks. And I'm like, try this one. I find myself disappointed in other audiobooks. I can't find anything that like lives up to the vibrancy of it. So anyway, all right. I know. Sorry. So, Troy's, Playin and Slayin. You guys do books.
Yeah.
You talk about,
come and see us in basementofdeath.com, where I put up a lot of the scenarios and stuff that we play there. I also have a Horus Heresy read through that still people read. I don't know why. That just I kind of go through a little summary of all 50 some books of some of that.
Nice.
And that's about it. And I am not on a ton of social media.
Good for you.
At basementofdeath.com will get to me. I think we might have an Instagram that I don't use, but that's about it. So
fair enough, man. Liz, what about you? We're not going to see you.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately not going to be at Adepticon, but I'll be missing all you guys, and I'll be watching all those posts stream through all day long and be like, "Oh,
making you jealous." We'll post a bunch on Discord.
Will be real.
We'll post a bunch on Discord, so you can see it.
I will live vicariously. I don't have a real shout out. I don't have an organization or anything like that. The Gamers Haven in Colorado Springs is a fantastic local game store. If you want to play 40K with us, we're there on Friday nights. And they have their own Discord, so you can meet some of the community there.
Sounds amazing.
But other than that, it's been a pleasure, you guys. Thanks for calling me back up.
Thanks for joining us. We always love having you, and you're just such a delight in the community, and like Shell loves watching the stuff you're doing too. So you're really a community champion there. We appreciate it. Josh, how about you? You're back from vacation.
Back from vacation. The one thing I'm going to give a shout out to is the Hobby Progress Challenge. We are kind of rounding the corner, approaching the finish line here. So still time, even if you paint one thing in the next month, like it's still entries for it. Everybody still qualify. Everybody can still potentially be the winner. And yeah, honestly, anybody who paints anything is a winner anyway. So
that's right.
That's just a shout out. Still going strong, and keep it going. And like, it's been really cool just seeing all the community bust through all the various things, and like seeing some of people's hobby ADHD kick in if they've jumped like project to project, or like just sticking with one thing and carrying through. It's just been really neat to see such a variety and so much stuff get painted.
I don't remember who posted it, but did you see on the Discord? So we talked about people, I think in the last episode, how many people had completed all 51 points so far, or whatever the points value was, and how many people were actually getting things accomplished. And somebody had posted like a picture of the vampires from interview. I think it's Interview with the Vampire, all standing on the balcony, looking all haughty about, oh, here's all the people who've gotten all the points available so far. I was like, that is a great post. It was so good. It was so good. Well, to okay. Go ahead, Liz.
Like it's been really popular in the sense of like people have really kept the rhythm. So the difference, I mean, I've seen so many hobby challenges fade out after 3 or 4 months, or there's like half a dozen diehards that actually finish it. But yeah, it's been great this year. People just keep going.
Yeah, and I got to hand it to Shell. She's been doing the tracking of all of it on her own. She swore she would manage it, and she's killing it. So I really appreciate her doing all that, because that was the main barrier for me running it again. I was like, I don't want to do the tracking. So I know it takes a lot of work, but every day she comes from work and she sits down at her desk and starts scrolling through all the things. So if you finished it, make sure you tag at Makes You Wonder, MKSU1DR, because then she'll know to input your completion. Okay. Well, with that, I think we've come to the end of the show. So until next time, this is Carl.
This is Josh.
This is Liz.
This is Troy.
And we're coming to you from the Astronomicon, where Henry Cavill is still my Superman.
And where all of our stories are part of the greater narrative.
And where we introduce you to Imperial Weirdos.
And we will all meet at Adepticon in about a week, except Liz. Liz, we'll miss you.
We will miss you, Liz. We're so sorry. I was very excited to meet up with you. So maybe next time. Maybe next time. All right, guys. Thank you so much. This episode of The Independent Characters is protected by the Creative Commons license. If you have further questions as to its use, you can find information on the front page at theindependentcharacters.com.